also remain standing. At this time, we're going to take a moment of silence for tragic moment in time that took place in Kentucky for the family. Thank you. I would also, at this time, remind everyone that as you came in, you saw a sign there that had some of the practices to keep this conversation and this hearing respectful and addressing it to the chair and don't make it personal. I also would like to remind everyone that this hearing is being streamed on YouTube, so you're able to see it on your phone and play it back. But also, I also thank those who are here, such as the frequent media that's always in these venues. Thank you for being here. Also, the emergency exits, as you know, they're to your left and to your right and to the rear. As you go down the stairs, the same way you notice on the first floor, exits on rear and both sides. As you also may know, on the second floor, the restrooms are being rehabbed. So if you need to use the restroom, they're downstairs in the first floor. I ask everyone to respect the chambers, respect the message, speak to the issue, and I also encourage organizations that feel that they're delivering almost the same message, if they have a lot of members, that's up to you. And if you would like to step forward and speak on behalf of that organization, just bring your members and say we are 10, 15 strong here. You have that option. But we are committed to be in these chambers as long as possible, so that way we can listen to your feedback, to your recommendations, whether they're pros or cons. I also would like at this time also to recognize my colleagues, the Vice Chairwoman Shelley Peterson. To my right, Councilman Miguel Sanchez, Councilwoman Sue Handua, and Councilman Justin Royce. In addition to our colleagues, from my left to the right, we have Councilman John Goncalves, Councilwoman Jill Davidson, Majority Leader Pedro Espinal, Councilman Espinal, Councilwoman Mary Kay Harris, and our Councilwoman and President Rachel Miller. So with that said, I welcome all of you. And also, I'll say this in English and Spanish. If you have a language barrier or need some translation, if you want to help someone, there's a QR code outside that if you use your smartphone, it will take you to an application with your earpiece, and you also have any this hearing translated in any language. So, para las personas que necesitan traducciones, tenemos una aplicación. Si usan el teléfono inteligente que tienen, hay una aplicación que puede traducir el lenguaje que quieran en español o otros lenguajes, y el QR code está afuera. Así lo pueden usar y lo pueden ponerse su radio escucha en sus orejas. Así que estamos aquí para escuchar a todas las personas hasta que no haya otros en este salón. El comité está dedicado a escuchar lo que es el pro y el con y sugerencias. Para eso estamos aquí, para crear un mejor Providencia. So with that said, we're here to listen to everyone and making sure that we hear pros and cons and any other suggestions that you may have. Thank you very much. And Madam, excuse me. And since I have your full attention, I'll make the announcement again. The Honda Pilot, color green, license plate VS513, is parked in the famous spot for the Haven Brothers food restaurant. And as a reminder, if you get hungry, you can also go out there and get some burgers afterwards. So, Honda Pilot Green VS513, you need to move your car. They're about to tow. Sorry to deliver that bad news, but we're trying to make sure that you don't. Please. With that said, Madam Clerk, if you could please read item 1.
Item 1, in order to amend chapter 13, housing of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Providence to add the next appropriate article, the Providence Rent Stabilization Act.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk. With the Sergeant at Arms, can you please bring the sign-in sheet that you have before us? Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you enter the letters of testimony into the record?
So noted.
Thank you. And just to remind everyone, this is a hearing. We're going to be listening to the testimony. This hearing, there is no vote needed and even to adjourn. So with that said, I would like to first call Larry Mancini, Chief Financial Officer. Actually, give me 1 second. Yes, the first person I would like to call is Larry Mancini, Chief Financial Officer for the City of Providence. Thank you, Mr. Mancini. And just to, you've been here for many years. Everyone is going to receive a 3-minute, and obviously Mr. Mancini, being the Chief Financial Officer, has an exception on that. At least 5 minutes, right? Also, my best to stay within the rules, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you could also speak directly into the mic, so that way people in the rear can listen and hear what testimony is being provided. Thank you, Mr. Mancini. You may proceed.
Once again, good evening, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee and the City Council. My name is Lawrence J. Mancini, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the City of Providence. This evening, I'm here specifically to provide testimony on the unknown potential financial implications this policy could have on the city. On January 26th of this year, the administration formally requested a fiscal note on the impact this proposal will have on our budget. Only today, the Finance Department was provided with such a note, which estimates that the cost of this program administration at more than $500,000 next year alone. There hasn't been enough time for this to be fully review this note, so I can't provide any assurances that this includes the full cost. Without that necessary information prior to today, the finance team conducted a limited analysis of the potential impact to the City of Providence's tax revenue and hence the budget, based upon information gleaned from a similar study from the City of Portland, Maine, based on rent control provisions. The Finance Department reviewed the number of residential dwelling properties that could be subject to the rent control provision and arrived at approximately 44% of those dwellings. Using those affected properties and its combined assessed value of $4.3 billion, and when applied against the respective tax rates, the cumulative projected tax loss using the Portland model would result in a projected property tax loss of between $1.9 million $3.25 million of tax revenue. Applying the same impacts observed in the Portland, Maine and St. Paul, Minnesota studies, the tax revenue loss of Providence could approach actually $10.3 million to a range of $17.5 million. This exercise does not take into account the potential decrease in property valuation we have seen because of these policies in some cities, which would further decrease revenue. As an example, St. Paul, Minnesota saw an average property value fall by 4.4% when the implementation of rent control policies was completed. Clearly, any lost revenue would have to be made up by shifting the tax burden to single-family homeowners, which resulted in tax raises for neighbors across the city. Hence, even an average tax revenue loss or shift of 4.3% could result in significantly higher tax bills for the median value single-family home. These are families, elderly neighbors, and community members who cannot bear the burden alone and afford an increase in their tax bill or a decrease in the property value. I hope that the City Council will consider the financial, economic, and policy impacts of this legislation and invite the experts in the administration who were not consulted during the drafting of this proposal to the committee for a more transparent discussion prior to any vote being elected. Thank you for your time and consideration. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
The next person I'd like to call is Emily Friedman, Director of Housing and Human Services.
Good evening, honorable members of the committee. I'm Emily Friedman, Director of Housing and Human Services. The City's Department of Housing and Human Services shares the deep concerns of so many neighbors here in Providence who are struggling with unaffordable rents and a real housing shortage. The pressure on families across our city is undeniable. But while the urgency is real, we must also be thoughtful about the solutions we choose. The department is immersed all day, every day, in the work of increasing the city's supply of affordable housing and designing programs that protect, preserve, and reduce housing for our residents. We see firsthand the scale of the challenge and the importance of solutions that expand opportunity rather than restrict it. Some on the council have proposed rent stabilization. The department understands why it sounds appealing. But to be clear, rent stabilization does not freeze rents or lower them. It simply regulates the pace of future increases. Further, evidence and direct conversations with day-to-day administrators in peer cities urge extreme caution when considering such a policy. In St. Paul, Minnesota, strict rent control adopted in 2021, like is proposed here, led to an over 80% drop in new housing permits, while rents still increased. Colleagues there have shared how difficult it has been to unwind the unintended consequences. In contrast, nearby Minneapolis experienced a building boom and declining rents after pursuing zoning reforms to increase supply. This is one of the clearest real-world case studies we have available. In Portland, Maine, leaders have had to muddle through administrative complexity, unclear roles, and a multi-year backlog of exemption applications and appeals. Research also shows that rent control policies often disproportionately benefit higher-income white households who are more likely to secure and remain in controlled units, not the lower-income residents most vulnerable to displacement. If our shared goal is to protect those residents, targeted, means-tested programs such as rental assistance, expanded eviction defense, and housing stabilization supports are far more effective tools in our pro-housing toolbox. And I hope the council will support thoughtful proposals like those when the administration submits its FY27 budget this spring. Vacancy control provisions like the one proposed here, which most cities have ultimately dropped or are seeking to unwind, can also backfire. When annual increases are capped at 4%, landlords are incentivized to take that full increase every year to keep pace with rising costs. That structure institutionalizes rent increases rather than moderates them. Additionally, the 99-year deed restriction requirement would mean nearly all of our existing affordable housing developments would not qualify for exemption. Combined with a new construction exemption period that is misaligned with standard mortgage terms, This creates underwriting and uncertainty that can slow desperately needed housing production now. I urge you to review the expert testimony submitted to you by Rhode Island Housing and other housing finance experts. Here in Providence, the city cannot afford policies that risk reducing investment or denying new homes. I urge you not to unintentionally undermine the good work we've been doing together to address this housing crisis. Together, we must focus on proven strategies that grow housing supply and protect affordability. Thank you.
Would you like your both testimony? Do you want to turn it in for us? Or send us those emails, or you probably sent it already? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. The next person we have here, Gregory J. Rice, the position against. You have 3 minutes, and there's someone here to the right will give you notification how long you have left, and then you must end. Thank you.
Thank you. When I began testifying at the State House years ago, rent control was a boutique, radical idea that was scoffed at by mostly everyone. The Overton window has since shifted to where we are today. It has become reasonable and acceptable to propose, support, and endorse rent control and/or rent stabilization. When I testified, I would spend time researching and studying the issue diligently. I would bring forth data, information, case studies, quotes from experts, facts about my experience, comparative city analyses, and beyond. My colleagues who are here in solidarity tonight would do the same. Year after year, however, after doing the same thing and seeing no results, actually seeing worse results, I have come to the realization that rent control has surpassed its original intention and now instead has become a religion. And as we all know, facts and information are the enemy of religion. What I've also noticed is that the Providence City Council official Facebook page has shifted from a neutral, unbiased, informational hub to a mechanized propaganda arm of the progressive wing of the Democrat Party. The official Facebook page is a government-funded resource that has been weaponized to promote an institutional consensus and belief to the untrained public eye that they have reached their determination on this matter. This is arguably one of the most controversial policy issues the city has seen. And the overwhelming majority of the content promoted is one-sided. That is as un-American as it gets. That's what they do in North Korea. Thank you.
The next person is Raymond Thomas, the position 4. If you could restate your name and your address, where you live, or at least live.
My name is Raina Thomas, and I live in Ward 3.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Raina Thomas, and I'm a member of Sister Fire, here to speak in support of the rent stability bill. Mostly because this is a moment of urgency, and I have not heard an alternative plan to address the rising cost of rent in the city of Providence. And while I cannot speak on behalf of everyone, I know that limiting a landlord's ability to raise the rent by 4% would, if nothing else, give me time to find alternative housing options. From reading the bill, I understand that this is not about rent control, but about rent stability. Rent control means that I move into your apartment at a price and it stays that price as long as I live there. Rent stability says you cannot increase my rent by a certain percentage each year. So you can increase the amount of rent each year. Secondly, one of the things that I'm also understanding is that my landlord would not have to raise the rent to 4%. That is also another misfact that is being spread. But they cannot exceed that 4% without justification. As a tenant who is subject to background checks, credit reports, criminal background searches, and references, I would love some transparency on why my rent is increased by more than 4%. Especially since I have been priced out of 2 homes in the past 6 years. My rent has not increased below 4%. My rent has increased by 11% in the past 6 years. 11% in Ward 1 and in Ward 3. I am a high school history teacher. I make less than $3,000 a month, and I cannot afford rent. I am teaching your children, I'm teaching your nieces and nephews, your neighbors, and I cannot afford to pay rent. I can't afford to teach. This impacts your kids just as much as it impacts your tenants. There is a teacher shortage in Providence right now because teachers are walking away and transitioning into other industries because we cannot pay rent. So this isn't just about money, this is also about your children. And if we're being honest, even you who are small landlords, you are being impacted by this as well. Right? If we're thinking about it, you actually should be allying with your tenants. Right? Because the big corporations, the reason why you're seeing such high costs in maintenance, why you're seeing such high costs in your taxes, is because they are buying up all of the land. And they're increasing your taxes. And so I recommend that you highly support this bill because this is urgent.
As you clap, the time keeps going, so you're shortening the 3 minutes for the speaker, please. So I know that we're passionate and we want to be supportive, but we want to make sure that we hear the testimony and that people can have the time that they dedicated to come out here and have the time to testify. Because we have about 3 pages and more coming. Thank you very much. The next person is Donald Martone. Against. Welcome.
Well, I think we have not coming. It is we talking about. You're not doing this. Not us. You told me to shut the hell up.
We don't want you to shut the field. We want you to
Just let you know, there's no outburst. There's also, you will be escorted out if there's any incidents or any shouting back and forth. I remind you about being respectful and we're here to listen to testimony, just as the democracy of our city, and that we are here dedicated to make sure we listen. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Martone.
Thank you for your time. I don't need the entirety of the time. My good friend put my name in the ring here, and he knows that I'm just as passionate about this subject as he is, and as well as my constituents. My name is Donald Martone. I am an unlikely candidate for mayor for the city of Woonsocket, 19,436 residents strong, but I'm also a former resident of the city of Providence and an investor. And I can speak to both ends of this challenging issue that we're facing. But I can tell you as a former resident, having sold last last year, before your tax increases, I can tell you that before we have a conversation about rent stabilization or control, as it's been misconstrued, because we don't have control. The city has control. So if the city has control, why don't we ever talk about the cost of the property before we talk about what it's required to maintain a property for the safety and the health of our tenants? I do want to call to attention of this 17-page document a very alarming definition called fair return. And according to this committee, it's defined as a return sufficient to maintain property in decent and habitable condition. And what does that mean exactly? Not only am I a former investor in Providence and decided to put my money elsewhere because of what's coming down the pike here, I do want to call to attention my experience in real estate over the last 12 years. Thank you so much. I don't need that much time. Thank you. The last 12 years of investing in selling real estate and helping people in this very situation. You bring back the free market, you allow the market to do what it has to do. These properties, multifamily investment properties, the cost is based upon the GRM, the gross rent multipliers, and the cap rates. Prices have already come down on these properties because people simply won't stand for it. There's your free market. When the prices come down, the rents come down. It's not justifiable anymore for an individual to want to spend $650,000 on a 3-unit property in Providence. Let the free market live. You will have your rent stabilization. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Alexa Bringer.
Members of the Providence City Council Committee, good evening. My name is Alexa Barriga. I live in Woonsocket in Ward 14, and I'm a member and I'm an organizer of Sister Fire. I'm here because my family and I have suffered from the lack of housing stability and tenant protections in Providence, and because I believe that rent stabilization is one critical step towards protecting the safety and the dignity of people in this city. I've lived in my current apartment for 1 year. I moved there after experiencing a 40% rent increase in 2024 in the West End, where I lived for 4 years with my younger sister and my best friend. In 1 year, our rent went up from $1,500 a month to $2,100 a month with no explanation. Our landlords became hostile and we were forced out. Before that, I lived in another apartment in the West End for 3 years. During my last year there, I was in and out of the hospital with respiratory infections caused by high levels of toxic black mold. Despite repeated requests, our landlords refused to test the apartment, and after months of being sick, I paid for the testing myself. When the results confirmed the mold, the landlords asked us to leave for a week so that they could treat it. On the first day that we left, they posted an eviction notice to our door, one that we didn't see because we lived on the 3rd floor. They never treated the apartment. Instead, they sold the building and moved to Florida. We were forced to move our belongings into storage for 3 months. I slept in my car, I stayed with friends until we were able to secure another apartment. And during that time, I was really scared. I was depressed, I was anxious, and I was working full-time. I just got an email that my rent would go up again this year, even though the hot water hasn't worked properly since I moved in. I spend about 40% of my income on rent. I've had to move further and further from where I work. I've changed how I eat. I skip my healthcare visits, all to make sure that I make my rent. And I know that I'm not alone. Many other Sister Fire members and many other people in this room share very similar painful experiences. I support rent stabilization because tenants need protection and we deserve accountability. Rent stabilization is how we can care for families, how we can care for our elders, how we can care for workers. Because it's about keeping people housed and rooted in the communities that they belong in. Care does belong at the center of public life, and I urge you to pass this ordinance without weakening it. So please vote yes on rent stabilization. Thank you.
Against?
My husband and I became landlords in Providence in 1989. So, though we're small landlords, we would not be eligible for an exemption under the proposed ordinance. One of our properties in Cox Point has 6 units, so it's not eligible. And I came with a little bit of real numbers here to talk about the landlord side of this for these types of small multifamily properties. And I know a 6-unit facility in Providence is considered commercial, but it's 2 little tiny small multifamilies. There's 5 apartments that are 2 bedrooms and 1 apartment that's a 1 bedroom. Our property taxes this past year on that property in Fox Point were $24,000. So we can't have this conversation without talking about the expenses. If you divide the $24,000 by apartment, and by month, that works out to $332 a month per apartment property tax, which is a huge number when you think about what people are paying in rent. I took a look at the last 4 years. Our average annual rental increase across those 6 units was 2.4%. Our average annual increase in our base operating costs, so I'm not talking about repairs, I'm not talking about improvements, I'm not even talking about mortgage. I'm only talking about property tax, insurance, utilities, and basic cleaning, like snow removal, that kind of stuff. 12.5% annual average increase across the same period. Now, those expenses are unusual. Things like utilities and insurance are out of control. And the property tax number I shared with you is 50% of that number. So we have a systemic and a structural problem here in the city, and rent stabilization is not going to do anything to control it, because if I don't have the flexibility to respond to the actual costs, especially in between tenants, then I'm just going to de facto raise my rent by 4% every year, which is going to hurt my tenants. They have not been experiencing those kinds of rent increases. So if there are abuses in the system, addressing the abuses, don't penalize good landlords.
One last time, the Honda pilot, license plate VM513, you need to move, it's going to be gone. David Brothers is ready to move into their place. I also would like to remind everyone that on Monday, this committee is going to be meeting at 5:30 for deliberation of the feedback that we're getting here and also out in the community. And so there will also be another stabilization listening session on Tuesday, February 24th at 5 p.m. at the South Side Cultural Center. And then on the March 4th, on the Federal Hill Rent Stabilization hearing at that time at the Bell Street Chapel. So with that said, the next person will be Sophia Gomes. 4.
Members of the Providence City Council Code Committee, my name is Sophia Gomes, and I'm a member leader with Aspire. I live in the West End. We organize women and non-binary people of color across the city, and we're here because our members' stories show one clear truth. Rent is destabilizing Providence. This testimony is grounded in more than 40 interviews and direct rental support to over 100 families across the South Side, West End, Fox Point, Olneyville, Smithville, Montauk, Mount Pleasant, and beyond. These are not isolated stories, they show a pattern. Rent is rising faster than wages. Many of our members spend 40 to 70% of their income on rent. People on fixed incomes pay 60% or more. One member told us, every year my SSI goes up a little bit. Every time it does, my rent goes up too. Another said, rent keeps going up, but my income has gone down. Rent stabilization is not about the lack of housing. This is about triple-deckers with mold, basement apartments with water cooling through the walls, units with roaches, mice, and no heat, flipped apartments with broken plumbing and freezing water. One member said, the rent is always crazy, it's never worth it where I live. Another shared, we were paying almost $13 for a freezing old apartment. Quality is not improved, yet the price goes up. Displacement is happening quietly and constantly. People are pushed out from rent rates, non-renewal notices, and month-to-month leases. It is legal on paper, it's devastating in real life. One member told us the lease wouldn't be renewed, that was it. Another said, I moved 4 or 5 times in a few years. Families are leaving Providence for Pawtucket, Cranston, and Woonsocket, not because they want to, but because they cannot afford to stay in the neighborhoods they grew up in and helped build. This instability creates impossible trade-offs. People skip medication, they ration food, they delay doctor visits, they fall behind on utility payments to keep a roof over their heads. A parent told us, I skipped meals so my kid could eat. Another said there are nights when food isn't even on my mind. I'm worried about rent. Housing stress is a public health issue. Members describe chronic anxiety, sleepless nights, and preparing mentally for homelessness. One person said, I actively think about whether I could live in my car. Another said, I cry every night. This is the emotional cost of unchecked rent increases. We also see the structural pattern. Corporate landlords replace local owners, communication moves to portals, repairs require 5 requests, rent increases are sent via email with no prior notice or conversation, decisions are made without community input. At the same time, we see long-time Black, brown, immigrant, and working-class neighborhoods transform. Development is not built for the people who live here now. It is built for higher-income newcomers. Rent stabilization will not fix everything, but it will do something critical. It will set boundaries. It will prevent sudden rent shocks that destabilize households. It will reduce non-renewal pressure. It will give families predictability. It will allow people to plan, not just survive. Our members are not asking for new homes. They're asking for stability in the ones they have.
Thank you.
Providence is not Boston. We should not match the rents being charged. Without intervention, displacement will continue outward, families will continue to fracture, neighborhoods will continue to lose service.
Against? You guys were probably expecting that. Probably weren't expecting for me to be against rent stabilization. And after listening to a few people here, I'm really against rent stabilization. A lot of these people don't really understand. So I want to take the time for a quick second and have everybody, because they all use the same search engines. You know, they're all going to be replaced by them soon. So I want them to go into their phones right now and ask their search engine if rent stabilization is fiscally responsible, is economically responsible. I want them to ask that question. And the first person to raise their hand. No.
You addressed me.
Oh, okay, but listen. But we're addressing the city. And so I'm going to do so, since you asked. But I just wanted, because there's a lot of people that had a lot of questions. One question that I have in regards to the city, I want to address, make sure you guys get this real quick. This is a simple math question. When you were paying 4%, and then you add additional 4%, and then you add additional 4%, and then you add an additional 4%, and then you add an additional 4%, and then you add an additional 4%, how much percent are you going to end up paying at the end of 6 years? Does anybody have the answer to that, the city council? I heard somebody, 24%, so 11% ain't nothing. So, you know, I want to go back into the testimonies. I think it's more important for you guys to really understand. What we're doing is we're pricing our people out. We're creating the chaos because we're taking all the funds to fill these seats with bureaucracy. We can use those resources to help the schools. We need our school system back. They just try to take 10. We gotta pay $11 million in fines and fees. We don't need any more litigation. We just paid $11 million for an accident that could have been avoided. That's $22 million. That can be enough to finance this community probably for the next 3 years. Because we don't know what type of litigation is coming our way. So we need to take a look at the bare minimum. The numbers, the math doesn't lie. But I just want to add just real quick because I don't have much time and I know that there's a lot of people that have an opinion on this. You know, this isn't about the city.
It's not just about rent. I'm not standing here trying to defend landlords either right now. I'm standing here because I love the city of Providence. Do you know what? I moved here because of the do not contact. I moved here because I was forced to move here. I moved here because there was no other place to give me sanctuary.
Thank you very much for the testimony.
So I want you guys to understand. Don't force these landlords who are your only revenue stream right now, because you could be cut off at any moment by the man in DC that I just went to go see. You could be cut off at any time.
Thank you.
And so who's going to support you then?
Your time has run out.
Thank you.
Next we have Celine Means. For it. Celine Means.
Hello, can you hear me?
May proceed.
Good evening. My name is Celine Means, and I live in Ward 13, and I'm a member of Sister Fire. We are in strong support of the Rent Stabilization Act. We believe this ordinance is necessary. We believe it must remain strong and equitable in its final form. As you've heard from our members, rent is rising, and the quality of the housing does not match these prices. I am one of these people where all of my income goes towards paying for rent while freezing in a poorly insulated apartment with mice. Sister Fire has supported over 100 families for rental assistance and mutual aid in neighborhoods across the city, and we see these patterns. Rent goes up and conditions do not improve. We support this provision that no rent increases shall be allowed if the unit is not in compliance with housing code. No one should pay more for unsafe living conditions. If a landlord wants to raise rent, the unit must be safe and dignified. We support the 4% annual cap. This is a moderate guardrail. It allows for steady increases while preventing shock hikes that destabilize families. We support the requirement of landlords to petition the Rent Regulation Board for increases unless they demonstrate an exceptional circumstances. This creates much-needed oversight and transparency. It balances housing stability with a fair return standard for property owners. We support the municipal complaint process through the Rent Regulation Board. Tenants need a clear place to go when there's retaliation, overcharging, and failure to maintain services. The ability to file complaints collectively through tenant unions is essential. Collective rights create safety. We do want to name some areas of the policy that we have challenges with. First of all is the default anniversary date of January 1st. There's no documented lease. January is one of the hardest financial months for families. Heating costs, holiday debt, seasonal work slows. We ask the council to consider alternatives to avoiding concentrating increases specifically around the worst financial strain period of the year. Secondly, there's a requirement that board members of the Rent Regulation Board must be qualified voters, and we have many residents who are long-term community members but are not eligible voters. They pay rent, they raise their children, and contribute to our economy, and we believe that lived experience in residency should be sufficient to serve. And so we hope that we do not exclude impacted residents from decision-making on the basis of citizenship. Lastly, we would like the council to examine the 15-year exemption, whether or not this timeline is appropriate. Providence needs steadiness in its rental market. This ordinance establishes clear rules, a structured petition process, and protections. It does not freeze rent, it does not eliminate profit, it creates guardrails. Housing is not luxury, it is the foundation for health, education, and economy. When rent is unpredictable, everything else becomes unstable. We urge you to pass this strong rent stabilization. Thank you so much.
And also Councilwoman Ana Vargas, who's just on this also. Thank you. Next person is Andrew Khan. Andrew Khan, against? Is Andrew Khan here?
All right, moving forward. Next person is Janice Haggard. Against? Janet Haggard. If Andrew comes in, just put him on the side, please, and then we'll call him next. Thank you. Janice, welcome.
Thank you, members of the County Council, City Council. My name is Janice Hanner. I've been a landlord in Providence for over 40 years. I respectfully ask that you do not pass rent stabilization. This ordinance, if passed, will not achieve what it's trying to do and will affect her housing. It will produce rent destabilization rather than rent stabilization. Landlords want to have stable long-term tenants. It's very disruptive when a tenant moves. You renovate the apartment, you advertise the apartment, you have a vacant month or two, you pay the utilities. It's not, let's forget it. It's not good for either the landlord or the tenant. In the past, landlords have not raised rents every year. They tried not to raise the rent until the tenant moved, but that won't be possible under this ordinance. I'm afraid that I'd have to raise my rents 4% every year for every tenant because I couldn't raise them when he was vacant, and it wouldn't hurt the tenant. If I look at some of my tenants, they've been here 24 years, 19 years, 17 years, 16 years. These people might have to move if I raise my rents. Rent control is also not need-based. It applies to everyone. As a small private landlord, I try not to raise rents on people that I think might have to move. A good tenant is gold. They help you maintain the property. My house is also in a local historic district. I have a historic home with wood clapboard, wood windows, which cost much more to maintain than vinyl windows and vinyl siding. I'm concerned that I won't be able to maintain the property if this ordinance is passed. In addition, rents went up during COVID when people from New York were moving here because they work remotely. People now have to go back to the office, and a lot of those people have left. I think rents are softening now. I feel that rent control will hurt the city of Providence. The assessments are based on the rents that landlords charge for the rental real estate. Property values will go down, and the amount of real estate taxes the city can collect will go down, and the city may not be able to pay its bills. I'm very worried that I won't be able to pay my bills. My water, sewer, insurance, labor, utilities have all gone up, and I don't know how much they'll go up in the future. I don't want to raise my rents any more than I have to. So adopting this proposed rent stabilization ordinance is a bad idea. Landlords will not be able to maintain their properties, and I feel the city will suffer. It will destabilize the housing market rather than stabilize it. Thank you for your time.
Hello, I'm Vivian Sutherland. I live in Ward 13. We are told a fairy tale in Providence. We are told that the market alone can fix the housing crisis. Landlords want us to believe that a right to housing is less important than their right to a profitable return on investment. But let's be honest about what's actually happening in Providence. Our housing system isn't failing because we forgot how to build. It's failing because it's been hijacked by landlords monopolizing the land and overcharging because they can. The landlord lobby hides behind the mask of the so-called mom-and-pop housing provider. They don't want you to see the LLCs, the shell companies, the massive accumulation of land. We are told they provide housing. No, the working class built the housing. Landlords simply gatekeep it. Providence is standing on a cliff. Over 55% of our homes were built before 1940. The iconic triple-deckers, the backbone of our neighborhoods, are being pushed towards demolition by neglect. What is the market solution? wait for the buildings to be condemned and develop luxury condos with only 10% affordable housing? In 15 years, by 2040, our city will be a gentrifying corporate playground for the rich in some neighborhoods and slum apartments costing probably about $4,000 in others. Not a place to raise a family. These won't be homes, they'll be investment vehicles for real estate developers and investors to park cash while our neighbors are priced out of the city. Rent stabilization is often called market interference. I call it a stay of execution. It would provide the foundational stability required to live a life not defined by the terror of an impending 30 or 40 or 50% rent hike. If rent stabilization makes landlordism less profitable for speculators, that's great. It should. Landlords should exist. While we need to prevent price gouging, what tenants really need is a rent freeze, a permanent cap that actually lowers the rent and ties it to the quality of the housing. The city needs a first right of refusal to take more housing into public ownership and municipalize the corporate landlords and the slumlords. Housing should be a human right, a public utility. Rent stabilization is the floor, and our demands are not the ceiling. We aren't asking for a discount. We are asserting our right to a dignified life in the city of Providence. Thank you.
Is he here? No, moving forward. Next person will be Jordan Frank. Jordan Frank. Against. Jordan. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you. It's Jordan Frank, Ward 2. So there's a scene in the Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark. It happens really early on. We're in Indiana, he's across the desert. He says to his colleague, "They're digging in the wrong place." Rental rates are too high, we're totally square on that. It's hard to afford the life that we need to have in the city of Providence, the data stays in. But is that the problem, or is that a symptom? If you solve the symptom, you're putting ointment on a heart wound, not actually doing the surgery that you need to do. The root cause is a vacancy rate problem. We have a vacancy rate emergency in the city of Providence. A good target vacancy rate is 6.5%, somewhere between 5 and 8. We're at 3.2%. Statewide, I think we're at 2.6%, so you leave the city, it just gets worse. We haven't seen a 5 to 8% vacancy rate since 2014, where the 26 some odd years before that, we sustained that vacancy rate all but 2 years. We have a vacancy rate emergency. The good thing is we're building our way out of it. In the year 2025, there were 857 permits that were issued to build. In the year 2023, 439. That's nearly double. We are building our way out of this problem. Building your way out of this problem does work. It worked in Austin, Texas, where rents got really high. In 2022, an average rent in Austin, Texas was $1,673. 4 years later, with inflation, it was down to $1,355, back to inflation-adjusted rates of 2017. They built their way out. What happened with rent control? You put the brakes on the building. You put the brakes on saving people from higher rent, which is exempted. Econ 101 is hard to believe it actually works, but when you take supply and demand and you add a rent control, you have a dead weight loss to society. That's a dead weight loss both to landlords and to renters. You can't get away around that. And does that really happen? Yes, it really happens. In St. Paul, as mentioned, building permits went down from 1,600 to 332. In San Francisco, supply decreased 15%, rent increased 5%. In Portland, Maine, cost-burdened renters were 47% before rent control. They were 52% after rent control. It got worse. It feels so counterintuitive, it's hard to believe. But Providence rent control, it is a NIMBY policy. Not in my backyard. It says don't build here. What will happen? Builders will leave. They will go to other towns around Providence, or if they're smart, they're going to go to neighboring states like Massachusetts, which had rent control and then banned rent control. And that puts them in a cast of one of 36 other states who have in fact banned rent control.
Thanks very much. Testimony, you can leave it with the silent arms and with the head took it. Just leave it with the silent arm over there, and he'll bring it forward to the clerk. Next person we have is E.B. Santana. Forward, E.B. Santana. Come on.
Hi, members of the committee. My name is Elizabeth Saldana. I'm a resident of Mortify and a Sister Fire member. And I am here tonight in support of the rent stabilization ordinance. I support rent stabilization because I support stability and predictability in the rental market. I lived for 5 years in a beautiful apartment on the east side. We were exemplary tenants, never missed a payment, took care of the place, and I thought I had a good relationship with my landlord. But in 2022, he informed my partner and I that he would be raising our rent $1,000 a month, up from $1,950 a month. For those keeping track at home, that is a 51% increase. We did our best to negotiate with him. We tried to request a smaller rent increase, but he insisted that the market had changed since we moved in, and that he now needed to put the apartment at market prices. As a tenant, I had no recourse. I felt totally powerless to fight back. There was no one I could complain to. There was nothing I could do. My options were leave or be squeezed for another $12,000 a year. The 6 months that we ended up spending trying to buy a home in Providence were some of the worst months of my life. I saved every last penny for a down payment, and I spent every waking moment looking at real estate websites or going to open houses. Whether as a renter or as a buyer, finding a place to live here is a full-time job on top of the full-time job I already had. It exhausted me. Everything here was wildly overpriced or literally falling apart. I stopped sleeping and sincerely believed that I would not find a place to live. I was low-grade sick for months, and I was running a 100-degree fever when I closed on my home. What should have been a happy moment was a desperate race against a rent pain that I had no control over. Many of the people who oppose rent stabilization insist that a market solution is necessary to solve the problem of high rent. But in my experience, the market solutions that have been used in my life turned me out of the home that I loved, had been in for 5 years, and put me hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt for overpriced homes that didn't match the quality. I'll end by saying that this is actually the best case scenario for young homeowners and people looking to buy here. My partner and I have stable, well-paying jobs. We are squarely in the middle class and still face a 51% rent hike with literally no recourse. Most of the people in Providence are dealing with a lot worse. It is sad that that is the best that this city has to offer. A difficult, overpriced home market for buyers or being squeezed for every last cent as a renter. And it doesn't have to be like this. We deserve better. The people of Providence shouldn't have to rush major life decisions like buying a home. And we shouldn't have to anguish for weeks and months about where we're going to live because someone else decided they wanted more money from us. I love to say rent stabilization is about taking care of Providence by making it affordable for the people who do love it to stay. I urge you to go in favor of this, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, council members. My name is Joe Luca, realtor. I've been a realtor since 2006. I'm a housing educator and someone who works every day with renters, homeowners, and small housing providers across Providence and all of our island. I'm also president of the Providence chapter of the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, and I speak on our behalf as well. I understand the intent behind rent stabilization. Rents have risen. Families are under pressure. Housing stability indeed does matter, but respectfully, this ordinance will make matters worse over time, not better. Rents will not go down, and this ordinance will hurt everyone. The facts show the truth. It never works in any form anywhere in the country. Providence does not have a pricing problem. Providence has a supply problem. This ordinance does not build a single new unit of housing. It does not reduce construction costs. It does not speed up permitting. Instead, it creates a complex regulatory structure that discourages reinvestment in the very small local rental properties that make up much of our housing stock. Most Providence landlords are not corporations. They are retirees, immigrant families, and local owners of 2- and 3-unit homes. When regulations make it harder to cover rising costs like taxes, like insurance, these owners can't absorb the loss indefinitely. What do? They sell. And when they sell, larger investors often buy, accelerating consolidation and long-term rent pressure. Research from cities across the country shows that consistent outcomes with rent control and rent stabilization, you have reduced rental supply, deferred maintenance, and higher rents in the uncontrolled market. If we truly want affordability, we should focus on policies that expand housing opportunity, allow more multifamily housing for reduce zoning barriers, speed up permitting, incentivize new construction and rehabilitation, and expand targeted rental assistance for households in need. Rent control treats the symptom, housing supply cures the disease. For these reasons, I respectfully urge you to vote no on the Providence Rent Stabilization Act. Thank you so much for your time.
Next is Daniel Denvier. Denver, Florida. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you very much. My name is Dan Denver. I'm a co-chair of Reclaim Rhode Island. I live on Forest Street in Mount Hope in Ward 3. Rents in my neighborhood have increased truly dramatically over the past 5 years, resulting speeding along spectacular gentrification that will soon spell the end of Mount Hope as one of the city's most diverse neighborhoods, a place where Black, white, Latino, Asian, working and middle-class families call their home. The landlord lobby argues that rent stabilization won't work. We know that's not true. If rent stabilization had been in place in 2020, just 6 years ago, Mount Hope families would have been stabilized. Our community would have been stabilized. And I really want to emphasize this because both sides of this debate argue over all sorts of things, cite different academic studies. There is no academic debate over whether rent stabilization achieves its core goal of slowing rent increases and stabilizing people in their homes. Triple-deckers are being bought up by speculators, charging twice as much for the same square footage as long-time owner-occupiers. And you can tell which houses are which. The speculative absentee landlords, you can identify them right now because they're the homes where no one has bothered to shovel the sidewalks. Rent stabilization will keep people in their homes. It will also slow down speculation. It's runaway rents that we see driving landlords, corporate landlords like 02908 and Strive to gobble up properties all over the city. If this was about anything other than landlord profits, then why don't we see anyone but the landlord lobby here in opposition to this ordinance? Is rent stabilization enough? No. Supply does matter. The landlord lobby says this ordinance will stifle development. They point over and over again to St. Paul, Minnesota. We just heard from a representative of the mayor that this was a clear-cut, real-world example. That is false. Check out the Boston Globe. University of Minnesota professor Ed Getz just had an op-ed. He's one of the country's most eminent housing scholars, based right next to St. Paul. And he made it clear that this was an absolutely misleading example cited by Ryback and now the mayor's office against rent stabilization. And anyways, it is very clear that sky-high rent is never going to incentivize sufficient development to solve this crisis. That's why we need to develop a new generation of mixed-income public housing. Finally, we know this is popular. A URI poll from last year, 72% statewide supported. In working-class progressive Providence, we know that is far higher. So the evidence backs us, and the people of Providence support it. Thank you very much.
Against. Is Ryan Ferrante here? He's coming. You feel like put someone in there? Ryan Ferrante. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Ryan. I'm here with Now Providence. I'm the Government Affairs Director. I think we all can agree that rent control is intended to help the average person living in Providence. As a mortgage professional, I find rent control particularly dangerous to the health of our economy, housing market, and those who are looking to buy a new home, whether they are a first-time home buyer or a repeat buyer. Here are some consequences of rent control. It reduces the incentive for investors to build new units, decreasing an already short supply. It reduces the amount of investors buying and subsequently improving the properties through renovation. It also hinders first-time home buyers because we have to use the rents that are established and 75% of them in order to qualify those home buyers. So to conclude, investors are going to be discouraged from investing. First-time home buyers are going to be barred with higher barriers to entry. So what does this cause? This causes an increase in supply with a decrease in demand. So rent control there's a very strong possibility that this will cause a housing crash for your constituents. I hope you take this into consideration. The well-being of Rhode Island depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dennis Hogan. Dennis Hogan. Is Dennis Hogan here? So no. Moving forward. Then we have, is it Michael Berry? Michael Berry. Four.
This is my first time here, right? And I can tell you one thing, it's not no AA. You know, I'm a disabled veteran, right? And which I have a lot of mental issues, right? And one of the things that keep my depression, my PTSD and stuff like that down is loud, right? But one thing I know is not loud, it's the high cost of rent. You know, I'm from Virginia, and I came down up here to have an Operation Stand Down. And since I've been here, I lived in veteran housing, right? So I had no concern about the community and the high cost of the rent until I had to get custody of my two boys. I love my boys, they're 14 and 16, but this was like a year ago. And so I had to get them right in, and I had to move out of government housing into the community, right? And my rent went up 125%. You know, and it was shame. And you got two teenage boys, they eat a lot. You know? So, you know, it's hard on me. You know, it's hard on me. And I started to realize that, you know, I can't afford that. As a matter of fact, I'm behind my rent right now. Thanks for considering.
Appreciate it. Next person is Harry Bellevue. Harry Bellevue. Bellevue. Is Harry Bellevue here? He's coming. Okay. As he makes his way in, just to remind everyone that you also could visit our website and submit your testimony to the city clerk at providencery.gov. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. I wanted to just make a point about expenses, really, that over the last 50 years, the councils have increased taxes in Providence by approximately 4,000%. 4,000%. These increases over the last 50 years have greatly contributed to the rent increases in Providence. This proposal may be called rent control or rent stabilization, but as a matter of fact, as has been explained, by any other name, the proposal is actually for revenue reduction for the city. It should be rejected as a violation of the charter, which specifically calls for a balanced budget by expense reduction in section 809. Property owners and managers are custodians of real estate, which is one of the most significant economic engines in Providence. Their stewardship enhances an essential source of the city's revenue. Yet, by capping the wealth of the city, this ordinance will reduce the value of the real estate sector of the city's economy. Follow this little set of notes. In simple terms, by approving this ordinance, councilors will cap revenue, which will retard investment, which in turn will reduce property values, which finally will reduce taxable revenue to the city. Yes, capping housing revenue will injure the very city that you all are committed to assisting. Rent control is a mistaken movement that will not help any of us. The charter in Article 8, Section 809 instructs the council to take certain steps to do the job of balancing the budget by reducing expenses, not by reducing revenue.
Casey Grupiano, 4. Casey Grupioni. Welcome, Casey.
Thank you so much. My name is Casey Ripioni. I'm in Ward 1. I don't understand how we could possibly be debating choosing profit over people. Being a landlord is a job. You choose what you do for your profession. You choose your career. You don't choose to be a tenant. Who would choose to be a tenant and have their lives be decided on a whim by someone who has no incentive to care about them as a whole person? Everyone wants to own a home. That's the American dream. How can we prioritize profit over people? All I hear from the landlords here is threats. Threats that will raise the rent at the maximum every year. Threats that not making a profit will mean they will not maintain their units. Threats they will leave the city. Threats they will not be as benevolent and kind. Threats that they won't be able to maintain their historical properties. How is it my fault we made a bad business investment and can just lastly, we've heard a lot about Portland, Maine, and St. Paul, Minnesota. Let me name all the other cities in the United States that have enacted rent stabilization. New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, San Jose, Santa Monica, West Hollywood, Washington, Tacoma Park. Please vote yes on rent stabilization.
Linda and Drew, welcome. Against?
Thank you. Yes, I am against. After review of the above Chapter 13 housing law are my concerns, comments, and input. I serve as a landlord manager and owner at 221 Providence Street, which is also the address of the property to which this property was built in 1930.
Can you just get closer to the mic, please? Thank you.
This property was built in 1930 and has been in our family since 1970. This property, main building, consists of 7 residential apartments. The rents range from $865 to $1,900. Rents are dependent on square footage and amenities within each unit. Rents include water, sewer, and oil, steam heat. Electric and gas for cooking is the tenant's responsibility. Due to the building's age, maintenance and updating is a yearly struggle. Adding to these expenses are taxes and insurance, which make a fair rate of return a challenge. My concern is the new restrictions, rate caps, may hasten the plan to sell this property. Many purchasers will review the options of a tear down, removing the affordable units that I already offer with more expensive choices. Our plan is to hold on to the property if it is feasible and pass this property on to my children. The act will hasten the plan and affordable options with more expensive choices. So finally, rent control may move the sale of the property, resulting in perhaps another high rise, as my neighbors live on both sides of my property. I believe I have kept the rents at a reasonable rate. My taxes along with insurance, maintenance, and water, sewer, and oil are challenging the opportunity of a fair market return, even before the rate cap. So my answer is no to Providence rate stabilization. We have some good landlords out there. Thank you.
As Julia is coming up, just reminding everyone that's coming in, if you want to speak, you can come in the front and sign in. So at this time, Julia Trecherosa. Julia, all right, moving forward. Here we go. Welcome, Julia.
Hello, my name is Julia Trecherosa, and I am a renter in Ward 10. As many of us know, Rhode Island has been seeing one of the largest increases in homelessness across the country. According to the Rhode Island Coalition to End Homelessness, between 2023 and 2024, overall homelessness increased by 34.9%. Between 2024 and 2025, overall homelessness did go down by 2.8%. However, unsheltered homelessness went up by 15%. I keep hearing statements from people on the fence or against stabilization, where they talk about how we'll shrink the housing market or how we'll lower construction in the future, but I never hear anyone talk about the present. I never hear people talk about the way our communities continue to be gentrified and forced to leave the neighborhoods we grew up in because all of a sudden rent increases or sales of their homes to corporate moguls price them out of their homes. No one wants to talk about the increasing number of us ending up on the street as a result of the current housing markets. When I hear this constant discussions about how rent control will ruin new development, I can't help but wonder, new development for who? 5, 10, 15 years from now, the people who lived here for generations won't be able to afford the cost of these new buildings or these exponentially rising rent prices. Don't get me wrong, I'm not foolish. Politics should not just focus on the present. The future is just as important, and obviously we want more housing to be built in order to account for our population growing. At the same time, rent stabilization is meant to be an ordinance to help the community. I think it's important to point out the simple reality that the community is struggling with rent prices and will continue to do so regardless of new developments, unless some sort of protection is put in place for them. So often, when I talk to other renters, I hear war stories about having rent raised by hundreds of dollars every few months, and then upon attempting to move, being unable to find an apartment that is not only affordable, but even just in decent condition. It's also worth mentioning that there are plenty of exemptions and fail stations placed within the ordinance to account for rent stabilization concern. Many landlords worry about being unable to base rents after property taxes go up, but within the rent stabilization ordinance, there are clear steps to take in the event the property taxes increase by more than 5%. If the increase by more than 5% and 4% rent rate isn't enough. Similarly, exceptions are in place for small mom and pop landlords who live on one property and rent out the second one. And for those who worry about reduced construction, there are exemptions for rent stabilization for the first 15 years of new developments. I also want to point out some of the things I've heard today while I've been listening to other testimonies. Some people talk about how the 4% rent hike makes it so that there will be a definite 4% rise in rents, and how it will add up within the years. But there's a big difference between having your rent go up by 50% within 1 year and having it go up within 50% within several years. They also talk about taxes and property taxes going up. Rent prices factor into your property taxes. So shouldn't you want lower rent so that your property taxes go down? St. Paul.
Thank you very much. Against? Helio? Yes.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Paolino.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Joseph Paolino. I'm a resident of Providence my entire life. I still think and always will believe that Providence is America's best city. But I'm here today to congratulate all of you. I think it's important that you have this debate, you have this dialogue. But I think the rent control issue is the wrong prescription for the wrong illness. Now think about the city of Providence. How do you generate your tax dollars for your budget for schools and police and fire? You don't have the luxury that the city of Providence has with the income tax. You don't have the sales tax. You have property tax. The real estate industry is not the enemy here. Times are, the pandemic is, the craziness that's been going on in Washington are problems. The high interest rates that we see today with banks, the high insurance rates that we see on property, the high electric rates we see that's going on in real estate today, in your homes, every single day. Those are the challenges you have. Now you have an opportunity. We saw the state of Rhode Island pass $100 million bond issue. In fact, even more than that. I think it was $120 million. Have the members of the city council or the government here in Providence, have you sat down with the state, with the housing secretary, and to see how that money can be invested in the neighborhoods of the city of Providence? And how it's going to be affordable for the people. The city is talking about maybe doing a $25 million bond issue for housing itself. Have you come up with any ideas on how that's going to be done? The state's looking to do another $100 million bond issue in the 2026 election. Are you sitting, working to try to come up with solutions for that? That you need to expand your tax base. What the pandemic did, just to the office market itself. Ask Mr. Mancini here. All these big buildings downtown were once valued here, and now they're valued here. And there's discrepancy. Who's taking that burden of taxes? It's going to the homeowner, and it's unfair. So I tell you now, or I suggest you, I don't tell you anything, I suggest you, be very careful on this. I think you have the wrong medicine for the wrong illness. And I believe that with everybody here, the residents, the contractors, the real estate people, the landlords, together, let's figure out collectively how we can get affordability in housing. But rent control is not the answer. Thank you very much.
Is Jacob Kramer for it? Coming from the top, we're going to be calling Bruce Borowski. In favor? While Jacob makes it down. Bruce room? Thank you. It takes a long.
Thank you for being nice.
Can you get closer to the mic, please?
A little bit closer to the mic.
Thank you.
Rent stabilization is a necessity here in the city of Providence. I have been able to talk to neighbors throughout the city, whether on the east side, down to Admiral, down to Ward 5, Ward 14, Ward 3, 4, 5, all the rest of them. I hear stories about rents going up $300 year over year, $300 over 1 year, $200, $400. These are the kind of stories that are going to continue to divide this city. The point is, of course, we could talk about how this is only going to increase the misery of those living in the city. We can also talk about, of course, something that I've already seen in Atlanta, Georgia, after the 2008 recession. An overheated real estate market led to such dire consequences that it led to not only an overheating of a real estate market, but the floor falling out from under it. I saw houses that were 6 digits go down to $50,000, $40,000, $30,000 all over the city, all of Atlanta. I would hate to see that simply because of increasing an speculated market. Simply to see the same thing here in the city of Providence. Thank you.
The next person is Jacob here? All right, come on, Jacob.
Thank you. My name is Jacob Kramer. I'm a renter on Camp Street in Ward 3. I grew up in Providence, and I've seen the city change a lot over the years. And gentrification has its perks. Like sometimes you get $7 donuts, which there's a retreat, but housing's not a treat. And the galloping increase in rental prices comes at a steep cost in money, community, and human lives. I'm not going to go over the numbers because those have been quoted here, but just think that one number that really stands out to me. In metro areas in this country, 36% of adults could not cover a $400 emergency. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about these huge rent increases. I'm a social worker, and I see the consequences of these numbers. Most of my clients live on fixed incomes. I have one client who lives with his partner in a one-bedroom. 3 months ago, their rent jumped over 25%, from $1,500 to $1,900. There were no improvements, just pure extraction. This client earns less than $1,000 a month on SSDI. He is on the brink of eviction, and so are thousands of our neighbors. And eviction is essentially like you can never rent again if you have an eviction. It's over for you. I have witnessed the homelessness crisis firsthand. Rhode Islanders are crowding into shelters or are pushed into patches of woods or highway medians. People are at constant risk of exposure, hypothermia, and death. What's worse, Mayor Smiley has consistently gone out of his way to actively persecute unhoused people, bulldozing tent encampments in the name of, quote, public health. In 2024, 54 people experiencing homelessness died. Just last week, Irina Kozov, age 75, and her son, Stanislav Kozlov, 49, froze to death in the cold outside of the Marion Hospital. They appeared to have been living out of their car. The unregulated rental market is literally killing our neighbors. And for what? For a return on speculative investment. The ruinous increases in rent are due to unregulated housekeeping and huge neighborhood buyouts by corporations. Corporate landlords effectively act as a cartel, hiking their prices in synchrony to maximize their profits. Providence should do everything it can to regulate this parasitic behavior out of existence. I also want you to think about who is here to testify and who is not. For instance, one of my coworkers works 3 jobs, and so she didn't have the time to be here. She experienced a doubling of her rent over 6 years. And landlords who passively extract more and more money from working people are sure to come out if they feel like their future speculative profits might plateau. They have plenty of time to advocate for themselves. Some even have lawyers to do it for them. So
Thank you very much.
I'll just end with this. Housing is a human right, and we must always choose people over profit. I urge you to exercise power for justice and pass this legislation.
Thank you. Against. Up next will be Joe Stewart.
Good evening, council members. A lot of people are like, hey, Alex was formerly homeless. She's housed hundreds of people across the state. Why would she come out against this? There are many reasons I'm coming out against this. There are several people in this audience that I've developed relationships with. That is how I housed over 100 people. By creating relationships with landlords that actually have below market rent. So let me say this here. I live in Providence. I lived here my whole life. I care about Providence. And I agree housing stability is a moral issue. Families deserve security, kids deserve consistency. No one should feel disposable in the city that they grew up in. But we need to ask the honest question. Will this ordinance actually stabilize housing in Providence, or will the structural problem become worse? Problem has a housing supply issue. Our vacancy rate has hovered around 2 to 3% in the recent years. That is critically tight. There's nobody for anyone to move into. Economists generally consider 5 to 6% healthy vacancy rates. When supply is concentrated, prices rise. It's common sense. This is not ideology. This is math. Also, in all, you guys can name every single county that this has ever been in, it's never worked. So we're going to implement a policy that has no absolute metrics or anything that we've ever seen it work. At the same time, small property owners, I myself who live in low income, I am a tenant, owners are facing rising property taxes, which it causes insurance premiums, in some cases have doubled since 2020. The maintenance costs that have cost increased 20 to 25 to even 40 to 45% because of inflation of materials and labor. These aren't corporate landlords in Manhattan. This is Providence. Most rental properties are 2 to 3 family homes, 4 to 6. They are owned by working class families. When policy increases regulatory burden without addressing supply, what happens? We've seen this in other cities. Small owners sell. They've all said it tonight. When we sell, we often sell to larger, bigger, capitalized entities, and I'll get to the end. The bigger concern here is that if none of this builds not one unit of housing, this is what we need. Zoning reform to allow more density in appropriate areas. First-time home buyer program assistance so renters can become owners. I'm sick of renting and I deserve to rent. Providence actually tied to affordability commitments, direct rental support, and stabilizes tenants without destabilizing small providers. Investment in building, not just regulatory reforms. This is not a solution. This is a band-aid and a political move. We can go down to Kennedy Plaza and organize all the homeless people because it sounds good to them.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Jo Stewart. I live in the West End in Ward 13, and I am a member of Sister Fire. I'm here because I know from firsthand experience that housing instability prevents working class people from cultivating a true, dependable sense of safety and belonging, both of which we desperately need to sustain our ordinary, courageous, life-sustaining work in Providence. In the fall of 2024, my housemate and I began an apartment search with a reasonable combined income and spotless rental history. We toured dozens of small, badly repaired apartments with bewilderingly high rents. Our rental applications were rejected over and over again, citing our low income, despite it totaling 3 times the cost of rent. During those months, I lived between 3 or 4 homes of friends and family. I stopped sleeping. I was more depleted, desperate, and scared than I've been in my entire life. We've been settled in the West End for 2 years, but our landlord recently announced they'll be raising the rent this spring. I support rent stabilization because no one should be forced from their homes and communities by outrageous rent hikes. I urge you to pass this ordinance and protect working class people from landlords who manufacture a sense of scarcity and disposability in order to enrich themselves. I want safe, dignified living in long-term homes for all of us. Please vote yes on rent stabilization. Thank you.
Welcome, sir. Shannon. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a landlord, property manager, and realtor with almost 2 decades of experience deeply rooted in Providence. I am testifying on behalf of the Rhode Island Coalition of Housing Providers, a statewide organization that advocates for balanced housing and landlord-tenant policy. Quite frankly, the very serious consequences of this ordinance are above and beyond what can be addressed in this forum. It is also important to recognize that unintended consequences historically and repeatedly follow this policy wherever implemented, regardless of exemptions. The exemptions set forth in this ordinance are common practice. Rent control often excludes groups like new construction and owner occupants. You may be exempt from this ordinance, but not from its negative consequence. You will continue to hear from landlords' perspectives tonight, but that is not our only viewpoint. Single-family homeowners will bear a disproportionate tax shift as multifamily properties' values decline. This happened recently in Portland, Maine, where property owners exempt from this ordinance incurred millions of dollars of new responsibility. Destruction of the tax base means city services will be reduced, impacting all residents. And while this ordinance causes massive tax revenue loss, it also costs millions of dollars to implement. The rec board, administration, and legal support needed would create significant staffing expenses. The passage of this ordinance would definitely invite extensive litigation that the city would be forced to defend. Additional power is also granted over a dozen times in this ordinance for the board to make additional rules and procedures as it sees fit. This ordinance and its associated costs are incomplete and lack transparency. No fiscal note has been provided, well, until today, very late, to show proper due diligence and responsible stewardship over constituent tax dollars. Everyone is aware by now of evidence showing the reduction of existing housing units due to rent control, and of course the decline of new construction regardless of exemptions. This is even true of Portland, Maine. And with the double loss of housing supply, who suffers? Tenants and even prospective homebuyers. Data shows that housing costs overall tend to rise, and increased risk creates scenarios where exactly those this ordinance intends to serve struggle. Application requirements become more stringent and will not have enough housing supply to meet our needs. Many are still left out. This does not lower the rent. Lastly, we are disappointed that this extremely consequential policy is being based on an incomplete report. We commend the Housing Crisis Task Force for attempting to address the lack of affordability, but this simply cannot be done without all stakeholders present, especially those of the private market. In this report, public sector stakeholders set policy on private sector without representation. Landlords, property managers, realtors, mortgage bankers, and builders can provide some of the expertise missing from this report. There is room for all of us in this discussion. We urge you to vote no on this policy and instead opt for a results-oriented approach, including further zoning reforms, incentives, and targeted means-tested rental assistance. We have submitted written testimony and are available to work with you. Thank you.
Kimberly Licupi. Kimberly Licupi.
Here.
Move. Okay. Great. Welcome to
Yeah, thank you. I was not expecting to talk, so I didn't even have a speech ready, but I've been organizing the rent stabilization campaign for a while. Other people now have the reins, so I'm glad that it's coming up for a vote finally. Renters deserve some kind of relief, and I think it is very interesting hearing the landlords talk here. All we've heard are threats that they're going to raise the rent if this comes up, that they're going to sue the city, that they're going to do all this other stuff, and that rent stabilization is going to stop people from being able to build housing. And I guess my question is, if rent stabilization is what's going to stop you from building housing, why haven't you built it yet? Right? Please, I want someone to show me where is the building that's being built right now that's all for working people, right? That they can afford. We're talking about $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. Where are those apartments, right? If rent stabilization is stopping you, where are those apartments being built? Because it's a lie. You people don't want to build apartments for the people who live in Providence. You want to build apartments for people who make $100,000 coming out of office.
Can you also stick to the bill in front of us?
Well, yeah, but we also have to address what the opposition is saying, because the opposition in Rhode Island, Providence, on the landlord side is tough. I mean, we see these people out there, they all have really nice suits, and I want you to look at who's coming up to testify, right? The people who are coming up to testify for rent stabilization were all younger folks. We can't afford to rent, we can't afford to buy. The people who are coming up here and saying that it's great that they can raise their rent $1,000 a month or whatever it is, these people are old. They bought their homes when Ronald Reagan was alive. Right? What we need to do is take housing out of the private hands. That's what we really need to do. You guys there's a lot of complaints about how this is so radical. You don't understand radicalism. Here in the United States, we actually used to have rent control and we used to have public housing. Meaning we weren't allowed to just corner the market the way that is happening right now. This is a very moderate policy. I would advise the landlord class back there to actually take this before we move to real radical measures like something that the public owns. Thank you.
Next person is Leslie Hand against. Is Leslie? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Leslie Hand. I started as a tenant in the city over 20 years ago. I'm now a property manager. I'm a small-time landlord with many people that are there. I don't see the black rocks and the big corporations. It's really going to impact the people like us. I'm a local investor in Providence. I stand here strongly opposed to the proposed ordinance. Rent control will literally choke off all investment into increasing the housing supply and into improving the quality of the housing stock that we have. When I first came to town, the very first property that we bought was a pit, and pretty much everything around us was the same. We decided to invest in the West End because we wanted to revitalize the properties over there. The West End was too expensive for us. And the properties were either blighted or really one step from being blighted in the West End. Providence is not unique. Like many post-COVID markets, rent increased significantly post-COVID. But for Providence, a one-time blip happened, the expansion of remote work, migration from higher cost cities like Boston, the bridge collapse didn't help. People started moving over to this side because their work was over here. And basically, we had a blip rent spike that honestly, it hasn't happened for, I would say, I mean, we had people for 10 years that we haven't increased, maybe even longer than that. So for the first time, we did make increases. We had to. Because at the end of the day, there were other increases that were hitting us. Unavoidable costs that were way beyond what CPI was. Property insurance for us in the last 5 years has gone up 60% in our buildings. Property values have caused our taxes to go up 16%. Citywide, just in the last year, there was a 5.85% increase in tax, but the increase was disproportionately hitting rental apartments by targeting the 2 to 5 unit properties. Those are the properties that we owned. Now we're expected to shoulder the biggest brunt with an average 13% increase on our properties. Triple what the whole city is, so a single family was less. Meanwhile, all the material costs and labor costs and everything else have also gone up. So the increases that we have made on our tenants haven't even covered the costs that we're covering.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate it. Chloe Castellano, 4. Chloe Castellano. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I think there's two things that I really want to say tonight. I could go on about a number of other things, but I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota. Most of my family still lives there. And if I were interested in exploiting people, I could benefit from a deregulation of rent stabilization there. But the fact of it is that I believe in rent stabilization. I believe that renters and tenants here in St. Paul and cities around the U.S. deserve some kind of semblance of stability as we move forward. And another thing I want to, bring up is just that the opposition to this keeps saying that we, can't do our research and we don't know how to cite our sources. But the fact of the matter is that I am, a published research scientist. I got patents under my name, right? And I'm not the only professional researcher who supports rent stabilization. And we can do our due diligence. And so I implore City Council to please take seriously what the supporters are giving you, the numbers and the data that we're crunching, because we are doing the due diligence that the opposition claims that we can't. So just, think about the lives that you might be giving just a little bit of protection to when you decide to support this. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Missy Rose Benson, against. Welcome.
on behalf of the Greater Providence Board of Realtors, and we oppose the stabilization ordinance now before the full committee. We share your goal. Providence needs more safe, attainable homes. However, this ordinance will move the city in the opposite direction. It will shrink rental supply. It will slow needed investment. It will limit mobility and choice. It will hit small owners the hardest, and it will create cost and complexity. Providence should not address root causes. Providence should address root causes. We encourage policies that approve more homes by streamlining approvals for infill, mixed use, and accessory units, and set clear, fast timelines. Protect tenants from sharp spikes with targeted tools using time-limited safeguards tied to inflation and documented cost increases. Preserving existing affordable renters by offering rehab grants and tax abatements in exchange for reasonable rent commitments and code compliance. Reduce cost drivers by aligning fees, timelines, and utility connections to lower per cost units without cutting safety. We respectfully ask the committee to hold this ordinance and direct staff to return when the package that grows supply, preserves existing units, and protects vulnerable renters without capping prices citywide. Our members stand ready to help draft practical plans and deliver data on production costs and vacancy across Providence neighborhoods. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Michelle Salcido, 4. Michelle Salcido. Okay, it's come. All right, how about Tamika Fastrana Cabrera? Tamika Eastman. Hold on. Right. Tamika? About Jordan Tower. Jordan Tower. All right. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you very much. Hello, folks. My name is Jordan. I'm a lifelong Rhode Islander and a resident of Ward 1. I want to put out a different perspective here, that as someone who has managed about 50 properties in the greater Providence area and been a renter, I'm in favor of rent stabilization. I used to be one of the folks who worked getting calls late at night about broken pipes, flooding an apartment, and I know there are some mom and pop landlords out there who were shoveling snow late at night a few weeks ago. That's why I'm in favor of this ordinance, because it protects folks like that who just want to have something to invest in and pass down to their kids. I don't hate anyone for that. Despite that, I want to put something to us, that the radical perspective is continuing the status quo without rent stabilization. It's radical that landlords who have more than an owner-occupier does don't have anything stopping them from doubling the rent if we want. And they do in our city. They do. That the radical fact is that our city of Providence is the least affordable metro area in the nation. And we have done so little to protect our renters. I think it's radical that our neighbors have died in the streets in 2026 here in our city. For that reason, I ask the council to consider rent stabilization as the right choice for Providence.
Thank you very much. Ronald Cleary. The name he's against it. Ronald Cleary. How about Michelle Sumbrowski? Michelle Sumbrowski. Welcome, Michelle.
As a resident, taxpayer, and disabled veteran, I am right to express my strong opposition to the proposed rent stabilization measure. For many veterans, like myself, home ownership, small-scale property management were the only paths to financially survival and stability after our service.
Instead of being supported, we are now being punished by policies that threaten our livelihood. I oppose this measure based on the following critical points. Financial hardships for mom and pop landlords. Rent control historically fails to fix housing shortages and instead crushes small property owners who cannot keep up with rising maintenance costs, inflation, and property taxes. Government overreach. My private property and my financial life are not the business of the City Council. The Council has failed to fix the city's core infrastructure issues, yet continues to demand more money, higher taxes, and more fines from citizens. Conflict of interest. It is deeply concerning that several members of this City Council work for, sit on boards of, or volunteer for organizations that stand to benefit from these housing policies. This creates a clear conflict of interest. If no one on the City Council is benefiting personally or professionally, why is there such a desperate push to pass this? Lack of transparency. This is a major policy shift that affects every homeowner in the city. I demand that you delay any vote and insist mail a comprehensive information packet to every homeowner in Providence, just as you do for tax assessments or for the information card sent out last year regarding undocumented residents. The homeowners of Providence deserve transparency and the right to defend their property rights. I urge you to vote this against the measures and focus on lowering the tax and find burden on your constituents instead.
I'm 52 years old and live in a 5-generational house, and I am so close to this absolutely disgusting city. All it has done is harm people in all sorts of ways. Black, Spanish, white, Chinese, Nigerian, Asian, Laotian. Those are all my neighbors. You all can get it. You all can't get the education right, the housing issue problems fixed, mental issues, crimes. The list just keeps on going on, and everything that government touches, it absolutely destroys.
Michelle? Thank you so much. David Morales?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm here proudly supporting the rent stabilization ordinance because the status quo of inaction is not working. The status quo of inaction has led to Providence having median rents that increase by 40% between 2020 to 2024. We have watched as our city is becoming ranked the least affordable city in America for renters. And these are not just headlines. They have real-world consequences. Just 2 years ago, Providence Public Schools shared that over 300 Providence students were chronically homeless. These were working families that found themselves priced out of apartments that they used to call homes before spikes to their rent kicked in and they could no longer afford to renew their lease. This has become the norm in our city. Working families whose wages are not keeping up with the rising cost of rent. And so before us, we have an ordinance that has been well constructed to ensure that there's a layer of stability to guarantee that a modest 4% increase to rent be able to ensure that many of our families continue to call our city home. Because far too often we have watched as our neighbors, whether it is on the east side, whether it's in Silver Lake, whether it is on the south side, they are being priced out. In my 5 years as a state representative, the most common phone call that I receive is a question of whether or not a person's lease renewal that is now watching them pay $300 more in rent is legal. I get calls asking if I know of affordable apartments because this working family renting on Academy Avenue is now being forced to pay $300 more. And we've watched what this also. Whether it's families going homeless or being priced out and moving to Woonsocket, to West Warwick, or to Pawtucket, the trend continues. People cannot afford to live in the city that they want to call home. As a young adult, I watched units that I used to live in despite the outrageous rent hikes. The one-bedroom apartment on Mount Pleasant Avenue that I used to rent back in 2021 went from $700 to now being listed at nearly $2,000. An increase of nearly just 200% in just 5 years. And that is a shameful reality that so many of our families are struggling with. And so I applaud Council President Miller and every co-sponsor on this rent stabilization ordinance. It was well crafted, it was well thought out to ensure that there were proper exemptions in place while also being able to account for spikes around property taxes. This is a reasonable ordinance, and I urge the committee to adopt it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Welcome, Danny.
Hi, how you doing? Going out to him, huh? Okay. Good evening, Council President and members of the Council. My name is Danny Vallejo. I was born in Providence at St. Joe's Hospital. I've been a Providence resident. Today, at the real estate office I work and operates here in Providence. I am a firefighter, a housing provider, and the father of a 3-month-old son, also born in Providence. I stand here respectfully opposed to this rent control ordinance. But before I go further, I want to read a brief scripture. Galatians 6:9-10 says, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone." That is stewardship. That is long-term thinking. Affordability matters. We all agree on that. But the question is whether this ordinance actually solves the problem. Providence has a housing supply issue. This policy does not create supply. It restricts it. When investment slows, when small housing providers exit, when maintenance gets deferred, when development becomes less feasible, the pressure spreads. It affects tenants, owners, neighborhoods, and the future growth. So I ask respectfully, who does this truly help long term? Especially during the campaign season, can we surrender self-glory and political positioning and instead work together toward durable solutions? Solutions that increase housing, protect tenants, and make Providence accessible for families who are invested here, not just transient, but those laying roots in building a future. Transparency matters. Public trust matters. When policies reshape an entire housing market, we must ensure there are no conflicts of interest or future incentives influencing votes. I have a 3-month-old son. I'm not waiting until he's old and prepared for me. I steward now. I build now. I invest now. We'll only plan for our children once they arrive? Or will we prepare the ground so they can inherit something stable? Genesis tells us we are placed in the garden to work it and take care of it. We are called to cultivate, not constrain, what has been entrusted to us. I am my brother's keeper, but I cannot do that if I'm not allowed to plow my fields and reap the harvest that enables me to serve others. For these reasons, I urge you to reject this ordinance. Let's pursue growth, let's pursue accessibility, let's pursue long-term housing solutions that strengthen Providence, a city that I love, for the next generation rather than restrict its future. God bless you all.
Angela Ford, welcome. Ford.
Hi. Hi, members of the council. My name is Lindsay Ford. I live in Mount Pleasant, Ward 5. I'm here with testifier. I have wonderful landlords who have chosen to offer me stable rent and transparency about changes. And renting from them has changed what living in Providence has felt like. My landlords consider the impact of their decisions on me, and their actions result in me feeling safe and valued. Despite living in Providence and renting since 2010, I can say now for the first time, Providence feels like a place I belong. My last apartment in Providence was a more common experience. Between 2019 and 2024, which is 5 years, my rent increased 4 times. I paid the increases, 3%, 4%, 10%, 21%, and I never missed a rent payment. But the cost to me was that I never felt safe where I lived. I loved my neighborhood, but in less than a year, maybe I couldn't live there anymore. How much more money would I need to stay? I had no idea. Why was the rent changing? I had no idea. As I became more connected with my neighborhood, lease renewal became a scarier and scarier time because the people and places that were important to me were at the mercy of forces that were unregulated and opaque. I worked hard to be a good tenant, but I always felt living in Providence more like a body in a room rather than a person that loves the city and brings value. Voting yes on rent stabilization isn't about suppression. It's about balance. Housing is a way to make money, but it is more than that. It is a place from which we get to our jobs and take our kids to their school. It's a place where we celebrate birthdays and our holidays and make memories that define our lives. Make memories that define our lives and keep the people we love the most safe. Housing is a container for the things that are priceless. And what does it mean if our city doesn't value them? Make no mistake, money matters, but our lives are short. And just as valuable is our time spent with people in the places we belong. And if we must leave our home, it's important that our city, our home, make sure it's justified and truly worth it. Thank you for your time. Please vote yes on rent stabilization. Best wishes.
Thank you. Susan? Against?
SISSON.
That's me. Against? Yep.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the Providence City Council. My name is David Sisson. I am an architect. I am a former resident of the city of Providence. And I'm currently in the process of designing over 100 housing units in the city of Providence. Okay? That's not for me, that's for my customers. And it'll be homes for people who are going to live in this city. I work closely every day with members of, people who work for the Providence Building Department, the Planning Department, the Zoning Department, and these are good, hardworking people who are working with us to produce more housing in the city. And I would like to say that I also work daily with all of you, because you, the members of the City Council, have passed some of the most progressive zoning ordinances in our state. And I've seen firsthand how those progressive zoning ordinances have changed the ease of producing housing in the city. If you had asked me 10 years ago about the city of Providence, I would have laughed, because we were producing 0 housing units in the city of Providence 10 years ago. It's the hard work that you have done, people in this room, that have made those changes. And some of those people are also members, are the folks at the State House. They've made some changes. Now, these reforms have had a positive impact. More housing, more construction activity, and more momentum towards addressing the housing shortage. But that progress is fragile, because nothing gets built when financing disappears. And I think we've seen a few people mention tonight that financing is a huge challenge when rent stabilization is enacted. Construction costs rise, insurance rises, property taxes rise, insurance rates fluctuate, but lenders won't predict stable revenue. they won't finance projects. And without financing, projects stop. When projects stop, contractors don't have jobs. Renters don't have jobs. I don't have a job. My employees don't have jobs. Existing buildings don't get maintained. Some of our work is maintaining those buildings. If you want long-term affordability, please work with the work you've already been doing on making housing easier to produce, so to produce more housing, and we can get costs down for everybody. Thank you.
Molly Richard. For Molly Richard. She's coming from upstairs. Just want to remind everybody that you can also submit your testimony, and we're going to call now Gloria Oviedo. Gloria Oviedo. While she makes her way down. Is it Gloria Oviedo here? Okay. Gloria Oviedo is not present at the time. How about Ada Turbi? Ada Turbi? Please state your name, because they call that out to me.
Yeah, this is Molly.
All right, hi, Molly. Welcome.
Hi, so my name is Dr. Molly Richard. I'm an assistant professor in public health at URI, and I research the causes, consequences, and prevention of homelessness and housing insecurity. So I'm here in support of the ordinance. I live in East Providence, but I'm here on behalf of people that I know can't be here tonight, whether it's my friends who are unhoused, or my students who are working full-time, sometimes more in addition to their work, to help their parents pay rent, and I can see it impacting their education and well-being. So I submitted written testimony with a lot of research and resources, and I'm catching my breath from the stairs, but I'm going to emphasize a few key points. So first, rent stabilization is a public health intervention. My own research shows that for every $100 in increase in median rent, homelessness, specifically unsheltered homelessness, increases by 28%. We've seen that live with reality in Providence. In the past month alone, we've heard this a few times, that 3 people died outside. We can invest in shelters and supportive housing, and we should, and we are, but without addressing rising costs of housing, we're bailing out the water from a boat that is still filling, and we really need to move upstream. Homelessness is only part of that harm. Rent burden is associated with food insecurity, depression, increased hospitalizations, especially among children, and even early death. This cost of rent is actively harming our neighbors' health right now. Second, and really importantly, from a public policy perspective, design of policy really matters.
name is Captain Morris. I'm a small landlord here in Providence. Me and my wife own a couple of 3 family houses. I came here to speak today. I'm opposed to rent control. You know, obviously, as we all know, rent control does not work. It hasn't worked in the past. It's not going to work in the future. You know, the market, you know, dictates the rent and also the expenses. And, you know, the expenses and the cost of doing business is what dictates the price. You know, unfortunately, kind of focus on rent cap, on the rent, for example, doesn't account with all the expenses that are involved in, you know, in a rental business. You have dozens and dozens of expenses, and obviously those are not capped. You know, water, sewer, taxes, insurance, you know, electric and gas bills, maintenance, repairs, pest control, lawn care. I could go on and on, you know, snow removal, all that. And those are not capped charges. You know, there's also bigger things that come into effect. Like you gotta replace a roof. You know, it's not going to be $20,000. You gotta replace a heating system, a hot water tank, you gotta renovate a copper. You know, capping something 4%, for example, but you're not capping all the other expenses associated with that. It doesn't make any sense. It's not feasible. The math doesn't math. You know, so that's what I give you guys my input. You know, I'm a legal migrant in this country. I came here, you know, with nothing. I didn't speak the language. Me and my wife were ready to buy some rental property to improve ourselves. And this policy is detrimental. This policy is against the American dream. It's going to crash the real estate market. Definitely the city. You know, obviously the valuations are going to go down. Property income is going to crash. And we're going to put the money into probably owner-occupied single-family homes and so on. So that's a lot. I urge you to vote yes for housing, but no to rent control.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony. Look about, I know I called earlier, Angela, Mama Richard, Gloria, how about Ada Turbin? Ada's not here? All right, we're going to page 2 now. How about Francis Weber? Francis Weber. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Fran Weber, and I'm a renter in Ward 3. I'm here today to urge you to support the rent stabilization ordinance to protect the 60% of our Providence residents who, like me, are renters, many of whom are financially burdened by rising rents and at risk of losing their homes. I moved to Rhode Island in 2022 from Arizona so I could pursue graduate studies in oceanography at the University of Rhode Island. We immediately, my partner and I, had difficulty finding housing that we could afford. We ended up in a small one-bedroom apartment in a renovated mill building on Atlas Avenue on West Drive, but we had issues from day one. When we moved in, renovations had not been completed and never were. In time, we learned that about 1 in 5 units in the building were actually being used as Airbnbs. Noise and security issues related to the Airbnb units were never addressed despite dialogue with management. When we looked for housing elsewhere in Providence, the options were bleak. Old buildings with small units in poor condition were renting for over $2,000 a month. Many landlords will tell you that they need to be able to raise rents so they can pay to repair and renovate apartments. Rents have been rising precipitously since the pandemic, yet we did not see much evidence of investment in rental units when we were looking for a home in this city. Because rental housing stock is in such poor condition, competition for high-quality units is strong. And because of this competition, we felt we were in no position to negotiate rent, lease start dates, or repairs before movement. We had to take what we could get. Our story has a happy ending. We found a lovely apartment in a triple-decker on Camp Street. We love our building and our neighbors. We've been here for almost 2 years and we like to stay, but we have an out-of-state landlord who we have little relationship with, and we live with constant anxiety that he will raise the rent. Though we think we are the kind of renters a landlord would love to have, there's nothing stopping him from raising our rent several $100s when our lease is up. Because we already put more than a third of our household income towards rent, even a few $100s in increased rent per month would mean that our home is no longer in our budget. We would have to move out of our home and begin a difficult search to find a new one all over again. That's why I support the rent stabilization ordinance. It would give me and renters like me the peace of mind that our rents won't suddenly increase more than we can afford. We can plan to stay in our homes and be contributing members of stable communities. You will hear many landlords today say that this ordinance disadvantages them. I hope you will remember, however, that landlords are not disadvantaged people. Even a small landlord who owns several properties is someone with potentially millions in assets. All renters are asking for is reasonable protections against rising rents that provide the stability that property owners take for granted. Many landlords will also tell you that this ordinance will discourage investment in our community, but as my partner and I learned, investment is not created equal. Through our experience with Strive, I do support the rent stabilization ordinance because I believe it will protect tenants from raising rents. But we do also need investment, which is why rent stabilization is just one piece of the policy puzzle when it comes to achieving affordable housing for Providence. That's why I urge the council not only to pass this ordinance, but to continue to pursue a multifaceted approach to addressing the housing affordability crisis in Providence.
It's Mike Guerrero. How about Arif? She had it. Arif? She had it.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Aref Shahadi. I'm a first-generation Palestinian American, born right here in Rhode Island. I've lived and worked in Providence for 15 years. I want to start with why that matters and why it's relevant. Palestinians understand displacement. We understand that what it means to have your home taken from you, not by choice, but by forces beyond your control. And that is in my blood. So when I hear people in this room talk about housing as a human right, about the fear of losing your home, about dignity, I don't just understand it politically, I understand it personally, and we share those values. But I'm also a property owner, and over the last 3 years, after analyzing what I've had for rents, I've raised my rents a collective 0.7%. And I'm not here to fight against tenants. I'm here because I've spent weeks in the city's own data, compared Providence to cities across the country, and what I found, I think, explains why rents are rising faster than really anywhere else in America. So this ordinance assumes every property owner is the problem. It doesn't distinguish between the operator who hasn't raised rent in 3 years and the one who raises it every 6 months. It doesn't distinguish between the owner who reinvests in their building and the one who lets it fall apart. It treats us all the same. And the ones who get hurt are the ones doing it right, because we're the ones with the thick margins between what we charge and what we could charge. And remember, this is Providence. This isn't Manhattan, San Francisco. The property owners in the city, we don't have teams of lawyers and lobbyists. We don't have Wall Street capital behind us. And many of these families, like myself, are immigrants. So people who saved for years to buy a building because that was a path available to them. And again, this isn't fighting Blackstone. It's hitting and fighting against your neighbors. Regarding the housing supply, everyone in this room agrees on one thing, that Providence needs more housing. In 2004, the General Assembly passed the statewide ADU legislation, requires every municipality to allow accessory dwelling units. The entire policy direction of the state is add housing, add density, convert attics, build out basements, add units to existing buildings. That is the fastest, cheapest way to create housing in existing neighborhoods without displacing anyone. Now look at what this ordinance does to that exact same activity. Section 13-72, C3. If I take an existing building and add a unit, convert an attic, finish a basement, that new unit is immediately subject to rent control from day one. Those are new units. The rent board reviews the initial rent, full regulation, no exemption. So think what this means. The city's zoning reform says to add units to existing buildings, and this ordinance says if you do that, you're regulated immediately. You're punishing exactly the kind of small-scale neighborhood-level housing creation that every level of government is trying to encourage. You've heard the headline that Providence has the fastest-growing rents of any major metro in America. The answer in that data is that Providence has the highest residential to multifamily tax disparity in the entire state, 3.48 to 1 compared to 1.36.
Thank you.
That's 60% of the renters who shoulder all the burden we need to focus on the single-family owners who pay a significantly lower tax rate than everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Dennis Hogan. Dennis Hogan. Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the opportunity to address you all today. Councilors, if like me, you're a fan of the now classic TV show The Sopranos, you might recall that at one point, Tony turns to his son AJ and gives him some excellent advice. He says, "Buy land, AJ. God's not making any more of it." And I think the truth here is that it reflects that real estate is good business. It's always going to be good business. And that's the reason why so many people are interested in getting into this business. And that's why I chose to buy a home myself in Ward 2, where I live in an owner-occupied house with another unit. Now, the reality is that no amount of regulation that you pass, especially not this bill, is going to change the fundamental good sense of getting into the real estate business. And so what's really at stake here is whether you have the power to issue regulations that limit profiteering. I so strongly support this rent stabilization ordinance because my costs as a homeowner are relatively controlled. My mortgage is predictable. It doesn't change year to year. Yes, there have been costs associated with maintenance. Yes, there have been costs associated with rising taxes, but fundamentally, I can plan long-term to stay in my home, and I can plan long-term to afford my home. Now, my tenants have the same predictability because I don't ever raise that rent. But there's nothing stopping me right now from deciding that the market will bear a much higher cost and kicking out people who've lived in the neighborhood now for 6 or 7 years and who are saving so that they can get their own start in life and someday buy a home themselves. I think all renters deserve that same deal, and I think all of our neighbors in a city where the average income is less than $70,000, where 20% of our neighbors live in poverty, deserve the same protections that homeowners get, the same fairness, the same predictability. Now, I just want to address, in the time that I have left, a couple of quick things. First of all, I think there's a difference between the kinds of market goods that, are luxuries that are optional, and the kinds of goods that are necessities. And I think by right, they're subject to much stricter forms of regulation. We regulate what's in the food. We regulate healthcare. We need to regulate the housing market. Because right now, it's so out of control that people are really suffering. We've got a housing crisis, we've got a homelessness crisis, we've got an affordability crisis, and very unfortunately, we've got a great crisis. Now, the other thing I'll say is that, often the debate comes down to whether we should regulate the housing market or whether we should build. But I've lived in Providence now since 2014, and for most of that time there's been talk about housing unaffordability and a rising cost of housing, and I'll just finish by saying, we haven't built. If we don't pass this, things go right back to baseline. We're not going to build. There's nothing in this ordinance that stops us from continuing to build and expanding. Thank you.
Against?
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dan Escherman. I own and operate apartment communities on the east side of Providence. Housing affordability is a serious issue, and I appreciate the council's focus on it. I would like to share several potential but unintended consequences of the proposed rent stabilization ordinance. First, I encourage the council to consider the substantial body of empirical research on rent stabilization. While these policies can benefit some tenants in the short term, study after study shows they reduce the overall supply of rental housing and lead to lower quality housing over time, ultimately worsening affordability, not improving it. Housing economists have reached a long-standing consensus. When rent growth is artificially constrained, the housing market contracts. Fewer units are created and housing quality declines as investment falls. Fact research has shown that rent-controlled properties are significantly more likely to be converted to condominiums, permanently shrinking the rental housing supply. We're already seeing how these incentives shape new investment decisions. Even with a temporary exemption for new construction, buyers will discount property values knowing rent growth is capped at 4%, and many will choose to invest in markets with more sustainable economics. Meanwhile, operating costs such as insurance and property taxes have been rising well above that level. The revenue cannot keep pace with expenses, capital flows elsewhere. The same is true for projects that add new units. These projects just don't pencil out. The result is simple. Fewer homes get built and fewer units get added at a time when Providence needs more housing, not less. Second, and somewhat counterintuitively, this ordinance may lead to more consistent rent increases for residents. Historically, rents rise and fall with operating market conditions, sometimes increasing modestly, sometimes not at all. But if a 4% cap becomes the standard, many housing providers like us will feel compelled to implement the max allowable increase each year to hedge against future cost spikes. Ironically, tenants could face more predictable and higher increases than they otherwise would. Finally, Providence has an aging housing stock that demands continuous reinvestment. These improvements are not optional. They are part of responsibly and properly operating older housing. When rent growth is capped, owners may have little ability to recover these costs. Over time, this creates a strong incentive to defer capital improvements and housing quality declines as reinvestment slows. This creates a potentially dangerous dynamic. Policies intended to protect residents may unintentionally discourage the very upgrades that make housing safer. It also complicates compliance with lender and insurance requirements, both of which increasingly demand meaningful capital improvements. Well-intentioned policy can produce unintended consequences. When rents rise, developers respond by building more housing, and over time, supply helps moderate prices. We've seen this in cities like Boston, where rents decline materially and continue to go.
Terry Wright.
Good evening, City Council President. My name is Terry Wright, and I am a long-time tenant, and I live in South Providence, South Side, Ward 11 to be exact. I was also born and raised in Providence. I am also a housing advocate for the homeless and unsheltered population right here in Providence. Every day I work at the intersection of the rent is due and the shelter is full. I am here to tell you that these two things are the same crisis. And the truth is, this is not how we play Monopoly. And we are not pieces on a Monopoly board. We are tenants and families who solely depend on our landlords and our property owners in the city of Providence to make sure that every tenant and every family live in clean, dignified apartments that they can afford. Everyone isn't a high-wage earner, but we are all essential to the fabric of this city. Rent stabilization is a tenant protection policy, not a construction policy. Not a policy that will stop housing development. How can we all stand around and put a price on human value? I ask the question, where do people go when they have no place to go? Through the rising rents. Without rent stabilization, we will see the decline of our neighborhoods. When families are displaced, Our schools lose students, our local businesses lose customers, and our streets, lose the people who actually care for them. This is where property values truly sink, when a neighborhood becomes a revolving door for strangers rather than a home, and not because tenants have protections such as rent stabilization, but when the livelihood of tenants becomes this numbers crunching game to cause more systemic harm. I am asking you to protect the stability of the families who helped shape and are still building our Providence.
I'm sorry, if I could just ask you to wrap up.
Okay. Well, I certainly don't want to become another neighborhood statistic. None of us do, but this is what's going to happen if rent stabilization is not passed. Thank you all.
Thank you. Dominic Passarella. No Dominic. James, is it Height? James Light?
Height.
Height.
Yeah, I'm not going to testify.
Sam Levy? Sam Levy?
Good evening, my name is Sam Levy, and I'm a very good public speaker. So I'm just going to, I got some notes that other people have said things better than I can. But this bill seems to be like a blank check with too many decideds in it. And I don't know any lawyer who would say, just sign this piece of legislation and we'll decide what to take it later, as far as that goes. To the people that need landlords are rich and all have suits. Well, my suit's at least 10 years old. It was given to me at that point in time, and that's the only one I got. And as far as I'm concerned, this is taking away my property rights as a landlord and a homeowner. I started off sleeping on somebody else's floor. Worked 2 full-time jobs, bounced over for 2 full-time jobs. And at one point I was working 5 jobs to be able to get the house that I did at home. It's a 2-family house. This is totally against capitalism altogether. I think if there's a cap, it's going to deteriorate the property in general, and it's going to increase the criteria for any tenant coming in. I've taken plenty of chances on tenants before, and I will not take those kind of chances again, because any kind of chance that the city can say you can't get rid of this tenant for whatever reason. I will start things with, the FICO score is going to have to be 750. I'm 10 years on the job. That's extreme, but you get the point. If you're going to do this to landlords, then what are you going to do to the lawyer, the social worker, the carpenter, the doctor? You're going to limit their income. The person who puts money in the stock market. Are they limited to 4% a year, or are you going to take it? My rents are my income. I'm retired. If you limit my income, who else is right? Are you going to limit? And are you going to tell the carpenter that wants to sell his business, you have to sell your tools to the city first, or to your customer first. I mean, at what point you stop taking? Again, I'm very much against this. Thank you for your time. Very much for your time.
Thank you. Francis Weber. Harper Keane. Harper Keane. Harper Keane for.
Hello, my name is Norbert Keene. I'm a tenant and small business owner in Ward 13. Many of us were here when the bill was introduced. Hundreds of people on the stairs, stomping and chanting, melt ice, freeze rent. You could feel the building shake. Inside, a developer type in a blue suit chanted back, "Buy a building, charge what you want." Cartoonish to villainous on a day when people could freeze to death outside, but also professionally honest. The core tension in our debate is between two answers to the question, what is property for? On one side, so well represented by the man in the suit, property is an instrument of individual freedom. Owning things, including buildings, is how people exercise autonomy, build security, and pursue a good life. Interference with that is a kind of violation. This view is so dominant in American political culture that it often goes unstated. It's the water we swim in. On the other side, some things are too essential to be left to the market. Housing is one of them. When something is a genuine necessity, not a preference, not a luxury, but a condition of survival and dignity, then the logic of the market, charge what you can get, becomes extraction rather than exchange. From this view, housing policy should be organized around human welfare, not return on investment. This second position feels counterintuitive not because it's fringe. It's enshrined in the UN Declaration of Human Rights, and most wealthy democracies treat housing as a public good. It feels radical because property rights aren't just protected here, they're treated as almost sacred, prior to other rights. The fight over rent stabilization is partly a proxy war over whether that premise should go unchallenged. The landlord lobby doesn't need to explicitly argue that their right to profit should come before others' right to shelter, because the legal and cultural infrastructure of our country already assumes this to be true. The pro-tenant side has to argue against an invisible default. Is housing an asset or is it infrastructure? Infrastructure serves everyone. We don't let private owners charge whatever they want for roads or water. The question is whether housing belongs in that category, and in Providence we've largely said no. Yes, there will be unintended consequences. There always are when you intervene in a complex system under pressure. This worries me too. But we are in a crisis, and the cost of inaction is also a choice of consequences, one we've already seen. The question isn't whether this bill is perfect, it's whether doing something is better than doing nothing while we wait for a perfect solution that the market has no incentive to provide. New construction in an unregulated rental market will only make the market bigger, increasing profits for owners while doing very little for tenants. We need both construction and regulation, which this bill makes possible, but nothing will change if nothing changes. Thank you.
Yes, okay. About May Gambino. May Gambino. About Lois Latian. Lois Latian. May's here.
Excuse me.
Well, May. Yeah.
I was the fourth before. All these people that you want all signed. I didn't think it.
Thank you.
They signed way before me. So somebody needs to check on the list and the next.
I appreciate it, ma'am. I'm going to address that. So what I do is a for and against, and there's a whole lot of people in columns. So I want to try to go in order. So you will be called out. Welcome, May.
Hi, hello, downstairs.
It's okay.
I'm speaking to students now. So I'm a small landlord. I mean, small, I own a unit. It's a condo. It's on the east side. I also own a single family home that I share with my wife. And it's difficult for me to oppose this ordinance because the whole behavior of a lot of landlords is kind of grouping all landlords. And I see, as the ordinance is written, there are carve-outs, and I think that you folks are really trying to work and figure out a solution. And I think that there are other ways that we can approach this, whether that's through more money and enforcement, a better system to track who is abusing tenants and not making improvements that need to be done. But as the ordinance is currently written, it's difficult for me to support this. And again, I'm just speaking for myself and someone else who can't come this evening, we're not over on the problem. I have this one condo that I bought in the 80s when I was in my 20s. And the plan was to pay it off. And then as I get older, to be able to use it to help in my retirement and then have an asset at the end of it. And so for me personally to be grouped with these larger landlords, that I'm going to have to have this limit on what I can increase when in fact I actually charge a lower rent. Person living in my neighborhood is a professor. She's been there for 5 years. I hope she stays. I just would ask that you speak to more people like us and some of these other, actually a lot of women who come up here and say, look, I no longer live in my unit, but my situation is such that a limitation on what we're able to do, we already placed that limitation on us because we prize our relationship with our tenants. We prize our relationship with Providence. We live here. We're long-time residents. And I just think that I know this is a starting point for what you folks are doing, but I would encourage you to have more people like us come and sit with you and really try to sort away where we can remedy people who are being exploited. We can figure out ways to do this. We can look at large landlords. They have economies of scale, right? So maybe they can absorb some of these hits. But we're all small landlords, by and large, already regulating ourselves. Please don't ask us to be further limited by uncertainties, especially when we rely on this to help us make our needs meet too. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Chandel Wilson. Chandel Wilson. About Justice Gaines for.
Good evening, councilors of the whole committee and the other councilors who are present. Thank you for being here. My name is Justice Gaines. I'm a tenant living in Southside of Ward 11. I'm an organizer and member of Sistifier. I've lived in Providence for over 13 years, and in that time, I have watched rents double. Today, I'm writing in here to support rent stabilization. I live in Providence because I love its people. The people of the city have welcomed me, nurtured me, and my growth, and treated me with dignity and respect. Providence is where I found my chosen family, where my creative community is, and where I found my sense of self. Providence is my home. Yet during my time in Providence, many of my beloved community who were born and raised here have not been able to stay in the city. From 2018 to 2022, I was working at an organization supporting queer and trans youth of color at the transitional ages between 18 and 22. Every week, at least one youth reached out to me for help paying rent or to find a new place to live. Many of these young people, again, born and raised in Providence, were forced to move to Pawtucket, Edgewood, or even Woonsocket to find stable, affordable housing. Meanwhile, as the rents increased, they still had rodents, mold, and water issues that would go unaddressed. At Sistifier, we found these stories are only increasing. Women and non-binary people of color in the city are becoming more and more dependent on mutual aid networks, GoFundMes, and the goodwill of their neighbors to remain in their homes. Families are choosing between buying groceries and paying rent. People are working 2, 3, even 4 jobs to afford housing, leaving little to no room to be with their loved ones. Is that the city we want? A city where we are too busy struggling to afford our roof, that we have no time to spend and care for each other. It's not the city I want. Providence could be thriving if renters weren't so burdened by unfair costs and unsafe living conditions. The people of Providence deserve better. The people of Providence deserve more than a living crisis that an unhindered market created. On the opposition, we hear that folks won't maintain their properties if rent stabilization happens, but the slumlords and property management companies aren't maintaining them now. They say it's dangerous to the health of the economy, but housing instability is dangerous to actual people's healths. They say it won't freeze or lower rent, and I am for freezing or lowering rent. Rent stabilization is the moderate solution. A market, every solution that benefits the opposition benefits their bottom line, but it does not keep people housed. The people of Providence deserve a city that keeps us housed, safe, and in community together. Keep Providence a great city by keeping Providence residents housed, pass rent stabilization, and an ordinance that prioritize the dignity and safety of tenants and renters in our city. Thank you.
We have a notice in the team about Christopher Smith.
Thank you for letting me speak. I'm a small landlord in a city right next door. And the reason I'm here is because I want to see this go through.
Can you repeat your name, please?
Christopher Smith.
Okay.
So, as I was saying, I want to put this on a personal level because I am a small landlord. I'm an owner-occupied landlord. I only own one property. As of recent, my mortgage, which I still have a mortgage, 10 years left to pay on it, the tax increases, which are amortized, are around $400. Because I live in the property, I split the cost with the tenant. I'm absorbing 200 of it, the tenant is absorbing the other 200 of it. Under a rent control policy with a cap at 4%, I would have only been able to up their rent $90, and I would have had to eat another $110 on top of the $200 cost that I would not be incurred. I understand that the city of Providence has slightly lower taxes than we do, so I would be looking at $174 increase, which is still sizable. We're paying $25 mortgage taxes and insurance. I also find it a little odd that members of this council are proposing a 4% rent cap increase when you couldn't live within it. You're increasing your taxes on property almost 6%, 5.85%. It doesn't make sense. This policy isn't fair. It doesn't work. Rent control doesn't work. It's never worked. We call rent stabilization or whatever you want. It's the same thing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next we have now Nox Shibu Shiba. Okay. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. My name is Nao Shibusama. I'm a member of the Korean and also a member in the district department. I mentioned my academic credentials because last month in his very chambers, a council member chided supporters of rent stabilization because he said that we weren't doing our history, we weren't doing our research, right? We didn't know what we're talking about. He stated that the Minister of Rent Stabilization in Minnesota suggested that rent stabilization does not work. But we've done our research, we know our history, but I'm not giving a history lecture, we're happy about that. But I do want to talk about research. I know that other councils are interested in studies about rent stabilization and how it may impact our city. So as a scholar, I'm speaking to remind you all that not all research is good research, right? Not all research is properly done. So for instance, the off-cited working paper on St. Paul, Minnesota, which was mentioned by both speakers at the very beginning of the session, about rent stabilization is based on faulty data. 2022 paper by Aher and Giacoletti makes the claim about a decline in property values due to rent stabilization, but their conclusion rests on insufficient empirical evidence. They were unable to show what the trends were prior to rent stabilization, and they had only one post-rent stabilization episode to make a comparison, right? This is not enough to actually draw any sort of conclusions. In other words, they lack the empirical evidence to make a statistically valid comparison. Professor Ed Goetz, the director of the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs at the University of Minnesota, points out that this paper is actually unpublished. It's a working paper, it's unpublished. He thinks that that's because it's unpublished is not published in a peer-reviewed journal, right? Because he believes that it's mostly due to its invalid quantitative analysis. This other sort of thing was also mentioned by one of the speakers at the very beginning about rent stabilization hurting renters. It also comes from the studies even more absurd, based on no evidence from renters or from landlords. Others opposed to rent stabilization have argued that this dramatic drop in new housing construction in St. Paul. But Professor Goetz points out that this decline in the decline actually happened before the stabilization passed. It also happened before, it actually went into effect in 2022, and actually even started happening before it was even introduced as a campaign in St. Paul. Right? So in short, this drop about the cause of new construction is also wrong. So we have to be discerning about the research. We can talk about research, right? We'll talk about studies, but please know what you're talking about. So I just want to end to urge you, as all members of the Democratic Party, to think about which side you're on. The vast majority of our renters in the city. What's more important, preventing neighbors from freezing to death, or making it easier for someone else to make another investment? What's more important, making houses in Providence or within reach of first-time homeowners, or to continue to make Providence a bonanza for outside investors? And so I'm just please thinking about, as Democrats, please think about what's going on.
Thank you very much.
Dylan Conley? Dylan Conley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the Providence City Council. Thank you for hosting this debate this evening, this discussion. I think the effects of an inflation crisis can be devastating to family budgets. When the cost of living goes up, something has to give. I understand exactly why the city of Providence would want to give working families a 5 or 6% break in the face of challenging economic times. I'm of course referring to the 1989-1991 cost of living adjustments awarded to union pensions as a result of the 1980s inflation crisis. History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes. Those CNT-era cost of living adjustments granted to a key constituency that were genuinely hurting financially, they helped people. They were also election-driven. And yet the city of Providence has never financially recovered from that 5% cost of living adjustment. We cannot adequately fund our schools or maintain our roads or stormwater infrastructure or maintain our buildings because of that 5% cost of living adjustment in 1989. Rent control is fundamentally just the cost of living adjustment. The cost of rent adjustment is understandable, just like CNT's cost of living adjustment was understandable. But ironically, in a sort of Greek tragedy sense, I believe that rent control will solve our pension crisis. Rent control will solve our pension crisis by bankrupting the city. It will force the union retirees to give up their pension benefits. In the same way that a 5% cost of living adjustment compounded until it was a financial liability the city could not afford, a 4% rent control will compound. Loss in multifamily property values hurts revenue. Reduction in multifamily rehab hurts revenue. Mass conversion to condominiums, moving multifamily units out of the commercial tax rate into the residential tax rate hurts revenue. The end of multifamily investment really hurts revenue. I do not say this derisively, I say this because I understand politics. Our schools need money, our pension liability is massive, but those are inconvenient realities someone else can deal with after the election. Rent hurts today. I'm asking the council to consider our history and answer this question. Is rent control just another cost of living adjustment that our city cannot afford? Thank you.
Clay Thompson. Florida.
Hello, Clay Thompson. Up until this past fall, I lived in Fox Point, a neighborhood with a long working class history, immigrant history. And that has been changing drastically in these past number of years. My apartment, the rent went from about $1,200 a month then, in only 4 years it reached over $1,700. That's more than 4% a year. It was tough. I made it work. Because I love Fox Point. I still do. I miss it every day. Last fall, I got the news that my landlord was selling the apartment. I knew what that meant. I checked the asking price. My rent was going to go up. I couldn't afford it. I started preparing, expecting a 60-day notice of rent increase any moment in my mailbox. And I could not find a single place in Fox Point in my budget. I could barely find anything in Providence in my budget. And then the letter came. 30-day notice of lease termination. It was more profitable for my new landlord to kick me out of a home I'd been in for years than to even try and ask if I could pay whatever absurd number they had in mind. I am no longer a resident of Providence. I was displaced, like many others have been. Let me be clear. My support to this bill is critical. It is far too conservative and limited, in my opinion. But it is something. It is something that if it had been passed 5 years ago, I might still be in that apartment in Fox Point with my same neighbors, those same streets. What we really need to do, though, is freeze the rent. So that way the workers of the city, the ones who have built it, the ones who have maintained it, the ones who make it run, can finally and peacefully continue to live in this city. Please pass this. I know these housing scalpers behind me disagree. I do not care what they think. This is something, and I implore you all to do even more. Thank you.
Good evening, Providence.
Welcome.
Chair.
Can you state your name, please?
My name is Cameron Goldwyn. I'm proud to say that I live and work in the city of Providence, and I live on the west side of Westminster Street. In Providence, we know we have an instability lifestyle. It used to be that 30% of your income went to your housing. Now, in order to do that at $2,100 for rent per month, you need to make $85,000 a year. The median renter's income is currently $43,000. That leaves them about $500 left after all rent and utilities are paid again. That's not enough for groceries, let alone medicine. And that's the median. 2/3 of all Providence renters are still under that threshold, 85,000. They're all trying to make ends meet and they're having a hard time doing it. I meet families like this every time I go to work in the Providence Fire Department, work on the rescue. and you see these parents working multiple jobs, just trying to make ends meet, and you know that they're struggling to get food on the table, and the first thing they cut is their own medication. They can't take their insulin, they can't take their blood pressure medication. Next thing that happens is they're in the ER. This is a human cost of inaction on rent stability. Rent stabilization is so important. The people who died outside of Marion Hospital in their car is a human cost of inaction on rent stabilization. This ordinance does not punish honest business. It protects tenants from landlords and management companies that treat them like a disposable line item. I support this ordinance because it gives tenants leverage. It creates a rent board that can take complaints, hold hearings, roll back unlawful rent hikes, order refunds, and impose fines. Those are real tools. That is real progress. And it builds on the City Council's earlier work to ban rent setting algorithms. We need action that is clear. We need action that is fair. We need action that is enforceable. We shall not normalize the displacement of our fellow residents, but instead we need to operationalize policy to contain this affordability crisis. I implore you to please support this ordinance. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you for having me, everyone. My name is Daniel Hankins, but please call me Cole. I figure government name in a government building. So, yeah, I'm a renter in Providence. I just went on Google that I'm on Ward 11, so that's Pine Street around Broad Street area. And I'm also an actor and a teaching artist. And I work with folks that are struggling with substance use disorder. And I teach a lot of the kids around here too. And as someone that is also in recovery, I can't tell you how hard it is for somebody to be in recovery with housing hovering over their head. One of the main studies in recovery sciences is that if you have proper housing, you're going to have a much easier time getting through life itself, let alone crippling addiction, let alone crippling debt. And as many of the artists in this city know, while I'm proud to say that I work consistently and professionally in my field, the reality is that I can't pay all my bills. I myself have to work multiple jobs between food service, delivery driving, theater, and teaching. And it's hard, it's rough. I put in the hours, and as much work as I do, month after month, year after year, it's still not enough. I am behind on most of my bills, including my rent. I'm putting up 70-80% of my monthly income just to keep a roof over my head. And I'm constantly behind. But not only am I behind, my entire neighborhood on the south side is suffering. Every day I walk out of the house and see my neighbors on the south side freezing in tents, asking me for change to take the bus to work, asking me to get them a sandwich at the gas station because they can't afford to live. And you don't have to take my experience for this. We've heard so many different statistics today on either side of the board. Rent stabilization is something that can help mitigate the problem. It is not something that will solve the problem. The big problem is these corporations taking money from all of us for everything. But the rent burden also reveals a structural racism in our local economy, as the burden falls disproportionately on people of color. If you've been paying attention to who's around here giving their testimonies, it's people of color who are affected the most by this. And this is why we can't just stop with rent stabilization. That keeps rent from increasing too fast. We need to be working to reduce or freeze rents entirely. Freezing them, this stabilization is a good step. But ultimately, the goal has to be ensuring that every resident of Providence has a safe, secure space to lay their head at night. And that means we need affordable housing. We've seen so many decades of failure with this. Also, I just want to talk a little bit about the system that we live in, where we have to have a testimony and hearing about something as basic a human right as housing. This is housing. A lot of people over here are talking about the health of the economy. What about the health of the working people that are running your economy? You need them in housing in order to in order to commit to the economy. So in order to put money into the economy, they need to be able to live in it and work in it and activate in it. That's all I apologize.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Pichardo. Thank you, honorable council members and other members of the city council. My name is Alex Moore. I'm the political director for SAA 1199 New England. And we represent about 7,500 healthcare and service workers across the state, including about 3,000 who live and work here in Providence. I'd like to talk about who our members are, who they care for, and why housing stability matters for the health and stability of the city. In Providence, we represent approximately 3,000 workers at Women and Infants in Butler Hospital. At Women and Infants, our members support mothers and newborns every day. They're the frontline staff who help make sure babies are born safely and that new mothers receive the care they need during one of the most important moments in their lives. At Butler Hospital, our members care for people experiencing serious mental health and substance use challenges. Providers who are often in crisis and need experienced, stable caregivers. We also represent about 300 workers at Providence Community Health Centers who provide primary and preventative care to tens of thousands of Rhode Islanders. In addition, we represent approximately 1,800 home care workers, most of whom live in Providence, and many are caring for seniors and people with disabilities, often their own family members, helping them remain safely at home and connected to their communities. We also represent about 400 family child care providers. They run small businesses out of their homes, caring for the children of working families across the city. Some are renters and some are homeowners, but their programs depend on stable local families. When families are forced to move because of rising rents, children lose consistent care, and these small neighborhood businesses lose enrollment. And the same pattern shows up across the workforce we represent. I'm not sure about time here. I'll try to be more expeditious. Many of our members are working hard, advancing in their careers, and in some cases negotiating better wages and benefits. But when rent jumps by several $100s at renewal, those gains disappear overnight. When workers can no longer afford the same prominence, the effects show up quickly. Hospitals and clinics lose experienced staff. Seniors lose trusted caregivers, and families lose stable childcare. Patients lose continuity of care. Running out of time here. I'll just close. I heard someone from the real estate lobby say that they have experts ready to draft, some additional policies that are common sense. We support any common sense measures to improve housing affordability, including stabilization.
Thank you. Georges. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I just want to preface by saying that I think we really do share common goals here. Now, I should probably say that I work on behalf of the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. We share a same goal, which is making sure that people are housed. But one radical idea that we can all kind of agree on is the fact that there needs to be more collaboration between city officials and local nonprofits as well. Where local nonprofits, in addition to other local nonprofits. Now, I'm all about for collaboration, but I yet to hear from any organization that is serious about this. We had members and we spoke up when we were trying to get the pallet shelters up and running. But the reason why that was delayed is because there are zoning restrictions in place. And I can go down zoning restrictions, I can give you numbers, I'll leave that all up to my written testimony. However, when there is a bill for more housing, to build more, and I know that's been the norm of the night is to try to advocate for new housing. Where's the other side when we need them to support us at the State House? We don't get support. We're the only organization that's up there advocating to increase the number of units, increase the number of rentals. But then we change and we try to, go down the road of not just, it's more demonizing a lot of, the small mom and pop landlords. So, in all honesty, this is not necessarily a Providence issue, this is also considered a state issue. Allowing, again, cooperating with our association, cooperating how we can find a middle ground. And there is a middle ground. There's also short-term relief. Whether or not we bring that up, as much, probably on us. But what I can say is that there are housing tax credits, there are rental assistance. But yet, whenever we are testifying somewhere, again, there's no collaboration. So before we jump to the conclusion, harp down each other's throats, let's take a step back. And if we want to get really radical, we can really say, how about collaboration? Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Paul Nasidia. Paul? Coming from upstairs? No? Once? Okay, moving. Next, we have Siraj Sindhu. Siraj? He's upstairs. While we wait for him, we're going to call Shayna Crandell. Shayna? She's also upstairs. About, wait. But there's a Ray Kabebe. There's a Ray Kabebe?
Thank you for having me here. As you said, my name is Desiree Bobby. I'm a first-generation immigrant. Came to this country from a war-torn country. We had nothing but the shirts on our back. My brothers and I worked very hard to take care of two elderly parents. Worked full-time jobs, part-time jobs. We learned what we needed to do. We lived in Pawtucket, Central Falls. We rented for a long time. But through being able to learn what we needed to do, we were able to buy property in Central Falls. And we were able to provide housing for others, okay? I've done a lot of work with nonprofits. I've lived in many areas throughout Rhode Island. I occasionally have health issues. But I'm still trying to build a future here in Rhode Island, and sometimes that's a little difficult. But we have opportunities. We have opportunities to work together for everybody, to come together and provide housing, right? We're trying to solve a problem here. Safe, affordable, reasonable housing, and property owners do that. Housing providers do that. I'm opposed to this particular proposal because it has not worked anywhere. And if we're trying to solve the problem, I'm asking, why can't we come together and actually have conversations to find common sense solutions, right? There are too many things that we can do together. We heard from people about people freezing to death. Imagine if we actually were unified to have conversations, to come to common grounds like battling electric bills, increasing wages and jobs. I worked in South Providence for many years. I worked with the homeless, worked with nonprofits that help homeless, that help empower individuals. We just did a program at the ACI for, post-release, which would include housing. So there's a lot of solutions if we actually come together and work on them, rather than try to push forward things that don't make sense and actually hinder the problem going forward. So I'm, just asking everyone to really consider coming to the table, finding solutions that are common sense, that are long-term and impactful together. Because this does not solve the problem. Year over year, we have money that goes out to a lot of nonprofits and organizations to help solve housing. That money disappears year over year, and we still are faced with the same problem. So I think we have better conversations, we ask better questions, and imagine the force we would have with both sides, because we're not enemies. If everyone just came together with a unified thing to actually solve the problem, imagine what a beautiful state we would have if we had conversations about it, rather than coming up with things that don't make sense. Thank you for your time.
And then Shana Kanda, too.
Thank you, members of the council. Ramadan Mubarak to all my brothers and sisters out there. My name is Suraj Sindhu. I live in Ward 13. I want to start by just saying some basic facts about what landlords are and what tenants are. If you're a landlord, almost always it means you own the home that you live in, and you own other additional, at least one, other properties that other people live in and pay you for the privilege to live in. If you're a tenant, it means you don't even own the roof over your head, and you are reliant on other people to provide you for that roof over your head, and you pay them every month for that privilege. I think we need to just get that straight, because that is at the core of the power relation between landlords and tenants here. It's a deeply, deeply imbalanced power dynamic. Landlords can raise the rent whenever they want, by however much they want. There is no legal limit on how much your landlord can raise your rent by. And your landlord can evict you with no reason, because we don't have just cause eviction protections. All of this means, bottom line, tenants as a class are at the mercy of landlords as a class. And yes, there are good landlords. There are landlords who keep their rents below market rate. But think about what that phrase means, market rate. What is market rate? It means as much as the landlord can get for it. Anything below that, we consider affordable. Market rate doesn't mean what the tenants can pay and what people can comfortably afford. No, it means as much as landlords can get. So, I think we should think about that power dynamic, because it's at the core of what we're all doing here. We're all here to exercise our democratic right to participate in this public policy-making process. Think about if you're a tenant and your landlord was up here speaking against this proposal right before you. Would you have the guts to go right up next and speak up against it? The power dynamic between landlords and tenants impedes the very democratic principles that are at the heart of our society. And that is why I'm so strongly in support of this ordinance, which drags the landlord-tenant relationship out of the shadows, out of the private sphere, out of dingy kitchen tables and dark street corners across our city, and into the light of day, and finally provides some much-needed public oversight through a rent board to provide that public scrutiny and oversight to make sure that tenants and landlords are able to resolve whatever complaints or conflicts come up in their dealings with each other. And so I want to thank the City Council for putting forward this really common sense, democratic proposal that upholds our basic values as a society. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Shana Crandall, and I'm a renter in Ward 13. Last week, I didn't have hot water, and I went down into the basement, looked all floor on, and the thing was completely rusted. I've got big gaps in my windows, I've got a hole in my bathroom floor. My landlord is required by state law to fix those things, but he doesn't because he knows he can charge market rate for my unit and always have a tenant, right? If I wanted to really contest that stuff, what I would have to do is withhold rent, wait to be evicted by my landlord, have an eviction on my record, and go to district court to get an abatement for those days that I couldn't take a shower, couldn't do the dishes, for all the gas bill that I'm paying for the air leaking out of my extremely drafty windows. Right? We need this rent board to be able to address the extremely common conditions that exist in Providence and elsewhere. I'm also a tenant union organizer. Just in the last couple of months, I've talked with more than 24 tenants who regularly don't have hot water. That is the reality here, and the rent board is a way for us to navigate those conflicts and have units actually brought up to code. We've heard so many landlords say that if rent stabilization is enacted, they won't be able to maintain units. The reality is people are living without hot water now and paying market rate for rent. I want to close by emphasizing just how moderate this proposal is. Protections like this already exist for homeowners and owner-occupiers. Homeowners and owner-occupiers are protected from unsustainable, massive cost increases through the homestead exemption. This is about extending basic protections that allow people to stay in their homes to tenants as well. So please support this common sense bill. That's stabilization. Thanks.
Robert Dias. Robert. You have Michael Dias? And you have a Robert Dias brother here too? I have a Robert Dias. So, 127 items? Is that you? No? Alright. Robert Dias is here? No? Okay, he left. How about, Christopher Kretschky. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you. Good evening, City Council. Thank you for being here. I'm honored to have the opportunity to talk about being a small landlord in this city who would not be exempt from these policies. I self-manage with my wife a total of 7 apartment units in 3 buildings in wards 1, 2, and 3. We do the work ourselves to the extent possible. We hire local contractors who have worked with us and who we like to work with over and over again. They like working with us too. I'm here to oppose rent stabilization because it does things that are unintended. And so I want to be clear that this is not the best long-term interest of our city. The best it ever gets is on day 1, but every year after that, fewer and fewer apartments are going to go to the people who need it most under laws like this. And I can tell you this because I had a family member who was homeless here in Providence. Okay? People who think that this is going to solve the homeless problem, it's not. Because he was paying rent, it was not his landlord who evicted him. He was kicked out by his fellow roommates because of a mental health and substance abuse crisis. Some of the other tenants had substance abuse in their past, and they couldn't live with someone like that. So he was out on the street. Getting a handle on the problem and just getting him to follow some basic house rules. We couldn't even let him in our own house for quite a while until he finally came around. It's just not, if it was as easy as me just offering him an apartment, that sounds like a reasonable solution, but it's not, because I would have to think about the other tenants I have in that building as well too. So we brought him into our own house. We took him into our own house and our living room because that's what all we had was an air mattress for him. Okay? But we were able to work with him, and through a lot of the resources that are available to the homeless, we were able to get him a lot of help. He's a lot more stable than he has housing now. But what I want to bring the point is if he was looking for an apartment with rent control, and when rent control takes, or rent stabilization takes apartments from the pool of apartments that are available, what happens happens to someone like him? Sure, the rent he might satisfy for 30% the rent to income, but what happens when someone has 5 times the amount that they need? They're going to win. It's not over time as apartments turn over, they're not going to be allocated to the people who need it most. And that's why almost universally we moved away from that in the 70s and 80s, and we went towards a voucher program. And the only way we're going to be able to provide housing for everyone is if we build. But if we destroy property values with rent stabilization, there's going to be no building. And when people see the direction of legislation in the city, they're not going to want to do it. So it's chasing small landlords out. We can't be part of the solution if we're all leaving.
Pinkett. Coming from upstairs? Yeah, what do they call him? About Arlo Nava. It is 9 o'clock and we still have 2 pages to go. Just want to let everybody know this is how important it is. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, thank you. Hello, Council. My name is Arlo Narva. I am a homeowner in Ward 3, here to share my support for rent stabilization. My partner and I moved here and purchased our home during COVID at the height of the market. I did not grow up here, but my father and grandfather did. My great-grandparents immigrated to Providence over a century ago, and my father was born at the Marion Hospital in 1946, just a few blocks from where I live now. The Marion Hospital is also where, as we heard tonight, exactly 1 week ago, 2 dead bodies were found, a 49-year-old man and his 75-year-old mother having frozen to death in the car where they were living. How is it that 2 people, including an elder of our community, can die in their car in the freezing cold in the parking lot of a hospital in one of the richest neighborhoods of our city, where homes cost upward of $700,000, $800,000, $900,000? The silence on this is loud. How is it normalized in the city of Providence for people who do not have homes to freeze to death, to be so pushed to the margins of who and what matters that they were there for days under a foot of snow before anyone even realized? I work in social services here, supporting folks who use substances and are facing homelessness. I'm sure it's not news to you that you can ask any person at any social service agency or any healthcare provider in all of Providence, and they will tell you that the biggest crisis facing the people they serve is housing. Any solution to this crisis will be imperfect, but it is well past time to try something new. You have the opportunity and responsibility to do that. Leading this city in this moment requires courage and creativity. Those who have died in the cold this winter, those who do not have a place to lay their heads tonight, those who are pushed out of their homes due to skyrocketing rent, you are accountable to them. You are their leaders. Think of those outside and those for whom rent stabilization will help stay housed. Please honor our neighbors with your action. Please be brave and pass rent stabilization. Thank you.
I'm not called someone before. There's a little. Welcome to, if you could just state your name also.
My name is Derwin Pinkett. I currently live in Ward 4. Give me 1 second, apologies. Good evening, everybody. For several hours, we have all sat here and listened to the landlord class, give every excuse in the book as to why rent stabilization is an unviable solution to the housing crisis that has plagued not only our city, but our country. Yet, despite the intense debate, 2 facts are certain, which is the fact that the status quo has failed in this city, and the rent is too high. So what is to be done? If the landlords are to believe the solution is to build, 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 however, there does not exist before us a serious proposal to construct high-quality, affordable housing. There is not a proposal to expand housing vouchers or rental assistance. There is one proposal before us, and that is to stabilize the rent.
No to rent control, yes to more housing is a lie told by landlords to themselves and to us so they can sleep at night while they profit off the destruction of our city. Landlords care about only two things: profit and control. That is why the supposedly good landlords who have not raised their rent for years are threatening to jack up their costs. That's why they're threatening to abandon the city that they supposedly care about. And that's why they spend thousands of dollars pushing propaganda and lies onto the people of Providence. Allow me to make myself clear, councilors. The proposition before us is not stabilize the rent versus build more housing. The proposition before us is rent stabilization versus the status quo. The same status quo that has driven up rental costs, driven down home ownership rates, and led to the death of 3 of our neighbors. We all know what the landlords think, and we definitely know what the people need. And we all know that all of you care about building a safer, more affordable Providence. The question, councilors, is what will you do? Thank you.
Excuse me,
Yes. Yes.
Esta persona se organizó ahora mismo y ya lo pasaron. Nosotros estamos aquí desde las 5:30 de la tarde y no nos han llegado. ¿Qué está pasando?
What's your name, sir?
Carboyer.
Yes, su nombre? Hernández, all right, thank you. Can you continue, please? I'll address it in Yo hablo ahora. Gracias.
Great. So as I said, my name is Connor. I'm a 33-year-old middle-class office worker, third generation Rhode Islander, a Federal Hill local, and through real estate, a small business owner. I'm asking you not to restrict my rights in running my small private rental business, for which all of my rents are beneath market rent rate. I do not fit the profile of a greedy landlord taking advantage of our local community through mismanaged rent hikes. In 2015, I purchased my first multifamily in need of renovation, most of which of the work I had done myself. I was picking something up that was desperately mismanaged, like many dated Providence properties. It had leaking fixtures, sagging floors, collapsing walls, mold, lots of things that you've heard from people here locally today. I fixed it myself with all of my savings. This home was almost completely uninhabitable. Today, through years of hard work and personal investment, that same property is beautifully restored. It is home to 2 married tenants I consider